Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling the General Purposes Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes?
Second.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. First item is the award of the contract for the database encryption project. Grant, James, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. In asking our questions, remember, we got a very long agenda and a lot of delegations to go through today. Councillor Day.
Yeah, this is to encrypt our website. Have there been attempts in the past to access the data?
Do we answer that in open? We better go into.
Oh, never mind, okay.
Ask that in closed.
Okay, I just wondered if we were London drugs, but, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Just more generally, I think everybody recognizes that encryption is necessary in today's world. But can you just make a general comment on the importance of that, considering the risk assessments in general that are out there?
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor Hobbs. Context of security is multi-layered, meaning that there are many different recommendations or compensating controls that should be applied in order to try to mitigate the risk. Database encryption is not something that used to be a common practice. It's become more prevalent because even in the context of someone being able to successfully breach or gain access, they still would not have access to the data, right? Because they would not have the decryption capability to decrypt that data. And so this provides a further level of control and protection to the city to ensure that our confidential information or the information we have within our systems cannot be easily read or breached.
Yeah, great, and very worthwhile expenditure. Thank you.
All right, may I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Further discussion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Brings us to the Microsoft subscription licensing. Grant, anything to add?
Your Worship, I have nothing further to add. Again, happy to answer any questions.
All right, may I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Any discussion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Then we have the draft, thank you, Grant. We have the draft community wayfinding strategy. To staff, Jill and Katie. So what would you like to tell us about this?
Your Worship, we have prepared a few slides and a very brief introduction. If that's acceptable, we can go through that and provide an overview of the initiative.
Okay, so just to let us know what these signs look like.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Pull in the mic, please.
Is that better?
Yep.
So the purpose of the wayfinding strategy is to enhance the experience of Richmond for everyone, providing a sense of unity as you move through the city while also celebrating the uniqueness of our communities and making the city easier to navigate. It is also designed to guide future public wayfinding investments in Richmond, making these as well-planned and resource efficient as possible. The draft strategy has been developed through extensive public engagement.
Why don't you just get to the bottom line?
Sure.
What do they look like?
Yep. So moving right ahead, so the strategic recommendations are really core to the strategy, and from these, we've developed the design framework. So this is option 1 that you see here, inspired by the Richmond landscape, including the bulrushes, the ocean waves, the heron. And what that looks like translated into the family of signage is on the screen now. So the family of signage is the same for both color options. There are 2 presented in the strategy. This is the first. And then the second is inspired more prominently by the City of Richmond brand colors and logo, and it looks like this. So here what you see is both the gateway entry sign. You've got 2 options which should be deployed depending on location, and then you've got directional and also directory sign beneath it. In addition to the signage, that full family of signage options on those 2 color options that we just went through, we also have digital tools and non-signage wayfinding elements that are also as part of the strategy. These would be developed further through implementation. So you see QR codes as an example of digital here, and then on the other side, this is a case study example of what non-signage wayfinding could look like. So in terms of next steps, if endorsed to move forward, we would do more public engagement on the draft strategy, which has already benefited very significantly from earlier public engagement to develop both the design concepts and aesthetics that you saw in those color options, as well as the strategic recommendations on which they're based. So going to that next round of public engagement, we would be inviting feedback on the draft strategy itself, feedback also on the design and color options, and then input on opportunities for early implementation. And then we would bring that feedback, the final strategy, and an implementation framework that would be proposed back to council in the new year. So I'll stop there for brevity, but certainly want to thank those who have helped us develop the strategy in the community and provided their input over the time period.
Bearing in mind that we've got a long agenda, I'll go to a number of councilors. Councilor McNulty.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be very brief, but thank you for this very detailed report. If I may, you're asking for endorsement to go to the public. I don't want to give you my own personal opinion at the moment, but as we know, when you're dealing with art, because this is public art, you'll have 1,000 different opinions. When you go out, will you go out with signs of different colors on it? I'll be quite frank with you, the dull blue is exactly that, dull blue. It doesn't do anything for me. But the green signs out there that we have up there are alive. And they, to me, you know, oh, wow, there's a sign, I'm very distinct. So will you have multicolors, or each of those signs in multicolors as you take them out, or are you only taking out the two choices?
So what we would be taking back to the public are the two color options that we presented here. Those color options have been designed based on the initial public feedback for aesthetics, and then also considering best practices around accessibility, including clarity and contrast on the signs. So we'd be presenting those options back to the public for their input.
In that case, I'd like to see the raw data with the groups that you're consulting with and the exact on it, because I think you're going to get 9 different opinions around this table and probably many in the community. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Day.
Hi. The question I had was, can we include one other thing other than just wayfinding, which is recognizing neighborhoods? And I'm thinking like Hamilton, Burkeville, Rydew Park, Shellmont, Seafair, Ironwood. Like, it would help give a sense of place, and I think it would be really good for building community spirit.
Through the chair to Councilor Day, so absolutely there are localization opportunities that are built into this strategy. So there would be opportunities through implementation, both on the signs, but then also through non-signage wayfinding elements to further develop that pride of place and really that sense of localization in those communities that you mentioned.
Councilor Glanders.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, thanks for this as well. It's pretty exciting to see the visual options. And I just want to confirm, so the option 1, it's not just that it doesn't feature the heron and the older brand that we've always had, it's also that the colors are more muted out and that they will have more longevity. It says in the report that the brighter colors of option 2 could fade out and not look as good. And so if the public were really not wanting to let go of the older brand, could there not be a combination of the older brand with the new colors?
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders. So in option 1, that blue that you see is actually the city's brand blue. It's just deepened to enhance the contrast to 80% for that sort of greater accessibility. And the yellow that's there is the city's brand yellow. So there are, in some ways, the option 1 does pick up some of those city brand colors, and kind of some of the curvature you see is inspired by the heron and things like that. So there are some elements in there, but we also wanted to present an option that is just the city's brand. So there are those 2 options there.
Okay. And so we don't need to endorse any option right now. It's just going to public.
No, it's just going to public.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Liu.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Thank you to staff. Personally, I like option number 2. Hopefully, there'll also be maybe a pickleball sign for some of the small wayfinding. Now, I think there was supposed to be some, or maybe it's separate from this, is a bit of a digital strategy that dovetails with this? Is it separate from this?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu. So what we've included here is basically at a strategic level how digital could be integrated, and then more would be done on that through implementation. So basically we haven't tried to present an inclusive amount of like all the digital tools that could be deployed and in what way. One place that we could start with integration of digital and physical is through QR codes on replaceable panels in the sign. So that is one option to basically integrate digital right away. But there would be greater digital integration options through implementation.
Okay, and when I think digital, I think like a big screen. And so I know that Surrey gets something like $4 or $7 million or something a year from Pattison Outdoors through their partnerships. And so Pattison runs it, they have advertisements, various other things. If we had that, we'd have an opportunity maybe to make it maybe even cost neutral or even cost positive perhaps in some cases. But it would also maybe be an opportunity to advertise events. And so whether or not they were paid for by people, but we have things like, spot prawns. I know the night market is a private business, but it's still something that's part of Richmond. And so maybe they would pay for advertising. The pumpkin patches, the farmer's market, but then things within the city itself, like our Maritime Festival, Canada Day, Whale of a Book Sale, those kind of things. Like we'd be able to advertise those things on that smaller scale, but they'd be up and present and.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu. So right now we're not currently contemplating advertising of private businesses. So we are not naming private businesses on the sign so that it is inclusive of all businesses and that it's fair and lasts over time. But in terms of highlighting civic events and other opportunities like that and sort of changing events and information, you'll notice that there is a page in the strategy that talks about the conditions under which digital would be a great tool, and that's one of them in terms of like when timely information is required by the community for different events.
But I think if we were going to have it, we still want to have it so that you could have private businesses because they are such big events sometimes that happen in Richmond. So like everyone's coming to Richmond, they're trying to go to this thing and to sort of ignore it. So we have to have a policy around giving somebody the opportunity to advertise their event because it is a big piece of what we are doing in Richmond.
I don't think that's what we're doing yet. Maybe that's the next step where we go into that. You're saying it's just simply wayfinding what is where.
So to the chair and also through the chair to Councillor Liu. So right now the primary purpose of wayfinding is to help people navigate, help them get to the given place that they're trying to get to and enhance the experience of the city. The city does have other opportunities like through our bus shelters where we do some of that third-party advertising. So there are opportunities that exist like that. But in terms of highlighting a various event or something like that, I think we'd have to explore what that looks like because the primary purpose of wayfinding would be to help people reach their destination and then to explore around there.
Okay, so we're not looking at trying to tie in those bus shelters with the rest of the wayfinding?
Not at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, I might as well give my opposition right now. I'd be against commercializing this whatsoever. And I want to just make a comment. And I like the blue heron. I like the blue, pristine blue, I call it. I've never seen a green heron, just for Councillor McNulty's edification. The question I have for you relates to, I'm really happy you put the gateway entry as part of this. You recall we had a discussion about a year ago with respect to this. What areas are you looking at entrance to the city where we would put those signs? And I'm assuming they would be the larger sign so vehicles driving especially would notice it.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed. So there are a couple of opportunities there. So we are aware of the 6 locations where we currently have signs. We would anticipate that before implementing new entry signs, that there would be consultation with the community to sort of assess those locations and to look at whether there would be any changes to that. In terms of whether you're looking at the larger sign or kind of the taller sign, there would be a number of considerations there, location specific in terms of engineering and public works considerations, as well as sort of space allowance, but that would also be part of the community consultation as well for input on what people would like to see in those gateway entrances.
All right, may I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Further discussion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you very much, staff. Okay, that brings us to the updates to the community homelessness table terms of reference. Chris, Kim?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have nothing further to add. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Day?
Thank you very much. On page 125, it says outreach-based service delivery, and it goes down to the list of all that. And then it says individual government or non-government organizations who may engage in independent or, is there supposed to be another line there?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Day, yes, there is. Informal outreach activities should be the end of that box. It was cut off. My apologies.
Oh, no worries. I figured it was something simple like that. I don't know if I like the idea of going from monthly meetings to quarterly meetings. I mean, so much can happen in a month or 2 months. And I'm wondering if we couldn't maybe split that down the middle and maybe meet, bi-monthly, just to give a little more information. And whether, I don't know whether or not that's possible. And then my second question is, I noticed that you don't seem to have any MLA or MP staff on the homeless support outreach group. So why would that be?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Day, this committee is intended to provide strategic oversight into the homelessness strategy and the implementation of that strategy. It currently has not had any elected official participation in it.
But if they knew what was going on, boots on the ground, they might be able to suggest various forms of funding or various ideas from the federal or provincial government. Wouldn't it be beneficial to have them there and at the very least kind of let them know what's going on?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Day, that is something that staff could consider if directed to do so by council.
Well, I'd like to make that amendment that the meetings go from not monthly to quarterly, but monthly to bi-monthly, and that a staff from all of the MLA and MP's offices be invited.
Can you suggest, why don't we deal with it with that first amendment, the bi-monthly, and then ask you to give us your comments between now and next week? Think about that and the implications of that. Because, that's, you're not asking MLAs or MPs, you're asking their staff, and there's various implications to that. I mean, it might be other government people, staff, that might be more appropriate. So anyway, we'll go to Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question to staff is, in regards to the Richmond Poverty Reduction Coalition, they're listed on our page 125 as the only advocacy and information group that was involved in the homelessness supports. They were also part of the steering committee that led to this table. They're not on the list on page 127 as a current organization, and I just question that because they've been doing their homelessness counts, their advocacy, they're getting informed, they're getting data. I agree. I think the information that's out there needs to go to the organizations, not quarterly, but a shorter time frame than that. And I also know that the Poverty Response Committee's been really trying to make us aware that seniors are having a major factor and a rising in the trend of homelessness in our community. And they're becoming homeless for different reasons than many of the others that require supports, like they're poor, they're being evicted, they have no family supports. And I just don't see that the existing group dynamic is able to capture that. A lot of these organizations are ones dealing with shelters and GMO and other issues that lead people to poverty. So could you comment on how seniors population is being addressed by the current group, and why could we not add the poverty response group? Thanks.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, the Richmond Poverty Reduction Coalition is an information and advocacy group, and the members of the table currently are either government entities, Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, Vancouver Coastal Health, City of Richmond, or are service providers delivering services to individuals who are currently or have recently experienced homelessness in Richmond. And so there is some challenge with including advocacy activities and some of the strategic conversations that are taking place related to policy, service provision, and service implementation.
All right, Councillor Yee.
Yes, just in response to having someone's political staff on, I'm opposed to this, and we just came through the politicization of some significant issues that the people at this table that represent the provincial government are a part of, BC Housing, Ministry of Social Development, Coastal Health. I don't need to remind people around this table what those two issues are. So I just would like to see the political side stay out of it, because they interfered in several things that were going on here, and let's not beat around the bush on this. So I would not like to see the political side. I think we can have our meetings separately, especially with the knowledge with this table and the political people involved, but I'd be opposed to that.
Councillor Howe.
Yeah, my understanding is that currently they're meeting quarterly. So what has been the experience? Do they feel the need that they have to meet more frequently?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, currently this group is meeting quarterly, and that has been seasonally very effective. There are often seasonal changes to service delivery, seasonal changes to demographics, and so currently ensuring that the right people are at the table has been well achieved on a quarterly basis.
Okay, good. And my second question is that, so again, based on the current experience, do they have the right or authority to invite, like the staff from various outside bodies to attend the meetings, to give information? Do they have that kind of practice, or do they have that kind of authority to do that?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, would you be referring to perhaps coming and giving a presentation? Through your worship to Councillor Au, yes, that is possible for the committee to do, and has been done in the past, to bring in outside entities to come and provide information or advice.
Yeah, so in view of that, my suggestion is that instead of, saying that inviting those MLA staff, MP staff to be official members, perhaps, add one sentence in the term of reference saying that they have the authority to invite, outside agencies or, political staff from various government organizations to attend the meeting. So I think that will solve the problem of, communication.
Through your worship to Councillor Au, I believe there is a statement in the terms of reference that would enable the committee to do that. The last activity on page GP 132, organize and host presentations from other groups in the community. That could certainly include staff from other elected officials' offices as well.
Right. I mean, actually, that would satisfy what I want to do, right? But perhaps make it more.
Okay, let's just get the motion as recommended on the table, then we can amend it if that people see fit. Okay, so the motion is on the table. Is there, the suggestion was to consider bi-monthly meetings instead of quarterly. But it's at the call of the chair anyway. If something comes up, it would be at the call of the chair, wouldn't it?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Yeah, so I'm not, my point of view, I'm not sure that's necessary. The idea of getting other people to come and present has been addressed, I think. And also, you've talked about the Poverty Response Committee and the advocacy role that they have. So I'm not sure that I think we need to amend it. Is there anybody wanting to amend something? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thanks, staff. Okay, so then we've got the award of the contract on the on-call refrigeration contractor service. Martin Yanis, is he here? You're not, Martin. Okay, what do you want to tell us about this? We've got the report. What do you need to add?
Through the chair, nothing further to add to it. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions on it? You have a motion then? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you. Okay, then we have the energy step code, and we've got a lot of visitors here for that. So if we could have staff come and tell us bring us up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have nothing further to add, but we'd like to proceed with your approval, a brief summary presentation.
Okay.
So this presentation responds to the motion received by staff on October 1st in relation to the report, updated energy step code and zero carbon step code compliance options for new single detached homes and duplex homes. And this was from the Director of Climate and Environment, and it was, this particular report was referred back to staff to bring additional information forward on today at GP committee meeting, together with information from other municipalities and additional information from BC Hydro. So largely that is encompassed in the accompanying memo to the report, where we've specifically answered the questions raised by committee members at that time. So just as we go forward here, just want to kind of, for everybody's clarity, wanted to describe, because we're talking step codes, there's two of them provincially, the energy step code and the zero carbon step code. Energy step code, no surprise, deals with the energy efficiency of a new building. The zero carbon step code deals with its carbon intensity. For the energy step code, it was adopted into the BC Building Code in 2017, and then subsequently adopted by a number of local governments, including City of Richmond in 2018. And that's local adoption into our building regulation bylaw. And on May 1st, 2023, step 3 is now the new minimum energy performance level in the BC Building Code for new Part 9 residential buildings. And so step 1, step 2 go away, step 3 is now the minimum. And this is signaled out well in advance, and was the intention of the step code is to step people through greater performance until landing at net zero energy ready new construction by 2032. For the zero carbon step code, similar format, 4 levels in this case, but it applies to all buildings, these 4 levels in terms of options. So this was adopted into the BC Building Code in May 2023 as a voluntary standard or an opt-in standard, much like the step code for local governments. And then subsequently adopted into Richmond's building regulation bylaw last year on October 31st. For all new, and basically what this means is for all new Part 9 residential buildings, there are 4 levels of steps of emissions performance, EL1 to EL4, EL4 representing the top level, which delivers emissions performance of a near zero emission building. And provincial policy direction in the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 is for the BC Building Code to require new buildings to reach the top level of the zero carbon step code by 2030. That's the only signal that we have provincially for that particular code, is that 2030 target. So the under our current bylaw requirements, which I mentioned were adopted last year, we offer builders, Part 9 builders, 3 sets of options. And they can trade off levels of the step code, the energy side, versus levels of the zero carbon step code. So kind of accelerating in terms of energy performance, step 3 to step 5, and then on opposite direction, a more lenient emission level from step 4 down to emission level 2. So 3 options are available for builders. That's our current building regulation bylaw requirements. And the intention was that the next increment in both the energy step code and the zero carbon step code basically our bylaw requirements was planned for 2025. And then in 2027, one more jump, we would be at the top level of both the energy and the zero carbon step code, subject to future council endorsement. Oh, I just want to make, I just want to note that in spring 2024, staff had heard back from a number of builders on the difficulty of in building new detached houses with natural gas-based heating at step 5. So what we did at that time was make an administrative change to allow natural gas backup heating that can be modeled as a backup system in the energy model for the application that would accompany an installed heat pump, so that only a small fraction of the potential annual energy use and emissions are modeled basically as a result. So that was one way that builders could have that option if they wanted to go a dual fuel system in a air to water heat pump system for in-floor heating. That was a way of doing that. So that was administratively made in June this year. Through the referral for the memo, a question was asked as well, where does Richmond stand in terms of relation to other municipalities that have adopted various step codes? And so we looked at the local governments that actually have it adopted as targets in their bylaws. And the way it works is currently 5 municipalities have more stringent requirements than Richmond. 17 municipalities, that includes regional districts, have equivalent standards, and 14 municipalities have less stringent. But notably, everybody's in kind of the same mark, or there's some generally in terms of the direction they're going, and some degree of overlap. There's about 6 municipalities that have more than one option. We have 3 options available currently. So there is some overlap in that in terms of similarity between local governments. And we just use a population total of the 5, 16, 17, and 14 municipalities, just a comparator, that these are generally in total represent a fair population in BC that is under this kind of system right now. So our current requirements kind of reflect this, what we call the status quo. You know, when we brought in in 2023, the zero carbon step code, we had signaled out that sometime in 2025, we were going to move ahead to the next increment. And that was part of our builder presentations and our builder breakfast events and all that. So the status quo represents continuing with the existing regulatory approach and timeline to increment or jump up to the next set of step code requirements in 2025. And then through the deliberation at committee, it was the desire was to come back with options. That was the referral to staff. So we've laid out 3 options in addition to the status quo for council consideration, committee consideration. Option 1 is basically to continue with the existing regulatory approach. Option 2 is continue with the existing regulatory approach. Both are similar that way, but just the timing is different between the two. In option 1, we make our basically the next, instead of 2025, we would move to our next set of requirements in 2026. Option 2, we have about 3 years between each level or each increment. And we would be going to the next set of step code requirements for single detached houses and duplexes in 2027. So if you look at those 3 together, you can see they're just about 1 year apart. Option 1, about 2 years between each increment. Option 2, 3 years between each increment. Option 3 is the third that was added to this. And basically it was to meet the express desire of moving specifically to the signaled timelines, minimum timelines of the provincial government for both the energy step code and the zero carbon step code. So option 3 would revert the city's current approach for detached and duplex houses and match the minimum BC building code energy efficiency and GHG emission requirements and timelines. And maybe a little more details on this slide. So ESC, energy step code, EL means emission level, and that is a sign of the zero carbon step code. And we're doing these in combo, so it looks a little complex, but basically it's an options-based approach, and we show the timing of those options accordingly. Once again, status quo, 2025 and 2027 would be how we move forward. moving to the top level, on both the energy step code and the zero carbon step code. That's our baseline comparator there. And then the options 1 through 3, where you can see how the years that we're proposed to move ahead, subject to future council endorsement, of course, in our bylaw, 2026 and 28 for option 1, 27, 2030, and 2032 for option 2. And then you'll see the years there's in option 3 accordingly. And you may wonder why there's an additional sort of increment in option 2, and there's 2 additional increments in option 3 compared to option 1, or the status quo. And the reason for that is the zero carbon step code. The zero carbon step code clean BC target is 2030. The energy step code target for the BC building code is 2032, so there's a bit of a difference. So in the 3, where we're jumping every 3 years in option 2 and option 3, we have to recognize, we just assumed in 2030 we would meet that top level of the zero carbon step code, so that would be part of the bylaw move at that time. So that's why you'll see there's more jumps in those 2 options. And there's was also a question on doing some comparability on incremental cost of building to the BC Energy Step Code. We've also done analysis that talked about the mechanical system, the zero carbon step code changes, and those were included in the main GP committee report as attachments. But we just brought forward the incremental BC Energy Step Code costs, looking at the average total cost of constructing a 3,000 square foot detached or duplex home in the Lower Mainland. The average is $425 per square foot. That's construction cost. And then looked at the nearest, most comprehensive information we could look at from the BC Energy Step Code, and that was the work done by the province in 2022, where they looked province-wide, all climate zones, all levels of the step codes, all buildings, and brought that forward into like an incremental differences between each increment of the energy step code. We're looking at the Lower Mainland increments here, and that's been applied against that, that cost of $425 per square foot. And so step 3, and step 4 and step 5, you'll see that the incremental costs are higher in each case. And then we've expressed that as a percentage, and then on a dollars per square foot incremental difference. There's a total construction cost listed there, and that's the average construction cost in Lower Mainland for that size of home. And then incremental construction costs relative to the BC building code, the percentages are expressed there. Development costs are about half that, and that's because once you include development costs, that includes the cost of construction, of course, but also land, permitting, marketing, and legal costs. It ends up being twice as much as their construction costs on average. Now, we've also received some information from builders saying, well, their construction costs are actually less than that, around $250 per square foot, for example. So staff have already started to do some work on that to do a comparability and incremental costs. And if there's any desire by committee to have that information, we can provide that.
But to that end, it would be worth noting that what we're seeing here on the $425 per square foot would be the cost to the home purchaser. The cost of $250 or as low as $250 per square foot is the cost that the builder incurs. So it's before your markup. And the Lower Mainland is a big region. It's quite a range. 425 is kind of your centroid, I guess.
That is.
Just very quickly, you've got equivalent to Richmond and Vancouver is listed, more stringent than Richmond and Vancouver is listed. Can you tell us about that?
Through the chair, yeah, so what that represents, City of Vancouver has actually 2 sets of requirements. One of the, as mandatory, choose one or the other. One of the mandatory ones is built to the certified passive house standard. So that particular option is higher than anything we have right now. It's near the top level of the step code and that, but it's actually exceeds it. So we've deemed that to exceed our requirements. On the other side, they have, City of Vancouver is trying to align its Vancouver Building Bylaw to the provincial energy step code, both in terms of levels and the amounts and the metrics. And they've done that with regard to the second mandatory option, which kind of trades off some of the steps and emission levels. But they're very, very clear on what, they're similar to where we were, I guess, previously, so it's a little easier than our requirements. So that's how that works.
Okay, there will be more questions afterwards. I suggest you leave up on the screen kind of the bottom line, which is that second last slide. No, the timing, the one before this.
Yes, just trying to.
Okay, and we may ask you to come back to this one as well, so just don't, yeah, one more back.
Yeah, it seems to be frozen. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, while you're unfreezing it, we've got many delegations. There are a few that are virtual, and we need a resolution of council if we're going to hear from those virtual presentations. What is the wish of council? Okay, so that's moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Secondly, I noticed that in looking out in the audience, and I'm looking down the list, there are a number of delegations that we have heard from before. Please, I mean, we've got 18 delegations. So please monitor yourself. Repetition has its value, but not always. So if you could bear that in mind. So we'll go quickly right through. Now, I'll call the first one, and then I'll let you know who's second on the list. I want that person right up front, ready to go. And we're just going to go right through these. For council, we're not going to be entertaining any questions. If you have questions, make a note, and we'll ask staff at the end. All right? Oh. Okay, so then we're going to have to take that off the screen. Apparently, you can't see the timer if you've got that on the screen, so we'll refer back to that as we need to. Okay, so the first, in fact, to staff, while we're waiting, while we're going through the delegations, could you make copies, paper copies of your presentation, please, and distribute them to the members of council so we'll have it. We probably won't need to go back to it on the screen. All right, so the first presenter is Kathy Yan. Is Kathy here? Come forward. The second one is Bill Thielman. Bill, if you could be ready to go. Okay, please have a seat. Introduce yourself. You have 5-minute time limit, and you'll see on the screen that we have the timer there. I'm going to hold you right to 5 minutes, please, just because of the volume of numbers that we've got. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, councillors, for being here. So my name is Kathy, and I have been living in Richmond for most of my life. I'm 26 years old, and when my parents were more or less my age, they had the courage to immigrate across the world to a place where they didn't know anyone and barely spoke the language with a toddler in tow, more or less. And while they didn't have any certainty regarding their future, all they had really was hope that my future, their child's future, would be better here than the future I would have had back where they used to call home. And so now, when I think about the future of my yet unborn child, and I think about the certainty and the uncertainty that I face, I think about how right now I stand before you as more or less a statistic. I'm one of 70% of Canadian youth who report that climate change is having a severely negative impact on their mental health. And although I don't really have any plans to leave Richmond, I can't help but think about, but struggle to have hope in the face of this crisis. But while it's difficult and challenging, it's not impossible. And so what hope looks like to me right now is 3 days ago in Victoria, where they implemented EL4 regulations for all new buildings, both Part 3 and Part 9. It also looks like Nanaimo, who did the same thing, except this past July, so they were even more ambitious. And for Richmond, as of right now, for Part 3 buildings, we're certainly behind because we're only at EL1 and EL2 requirements. And we don't, as of now, like as of yesterday, requirements for the January hasn't yet been published. But with the Part 9 buildings that's on the table today, we still have the opportunity to lead. And we can lead by simply committing to the status quo and committing to the requirements that this council has brought forward this past October. This is, for me, more than just a policy. Committing to targets that go beyond the minimum requirements outlined by the province is a reflection of leadership and long-term vision. It's a reflection of Richmond's legacy of ambitious and oftentimes award-winning climate action. And so right now, I think I feel the same way that my parents probably did 20 years ago before they were boarding the plane, because I don't know what home will look like for me in 20 years. I barely recognize what home looks like now with the wildfires and the flash floods and the heat waves. But one of the few things I can do is draw inspiration from my parents' courage and have hope for my future and my children's future. And unlike my parents, whose hopes were left in the hands of some nameless, faceless entity at Immigration Services, I actually have the privilege of knowing in whose hands my hopes are held today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next presenter is Bill Thielman. And then I'll ask Madam Clerk, the next one is Mike McNeese. If you could check to see if he's in the waiting room, we'll let him in due course. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the time. The BC Coalition for Affordable, Dependable Energy was formed earlier this year in response to several municipalities putting effective bans on renewable natural gas and hydrogen in the future for new construction years ahead of BC regulations. Our coalition is broad-based, and it includes business, labor, community groups, from the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses to the Asian Restaurant and Cafe Owners to the BC Building Trades Council, the Greater Vancouver and the Surrey Boards of Trade, to Napoleon Grills, to the BC Restaurant and Food Service Association, and many more. Our coalition members represent thousands of Richmond residents. I'm here to emphasize that this decision is about choice, giving choice to developers, builders, consumers, and businesses. We believe option 3 restores those choices. Option 1 and 2 retain what are effective bans on renewable natural gas and natural gas. We've polled recently, the BC Coalition has polled recently and shown 74% support across BC for the choice of energy and just 12% in favor of electrification imposed bans on to force electrification, 14% don't know. Outside of Surrey and Vancouver and Metro Vancouver municipalities, including Richmond, 78% of respondents support choice. In the Chinese Canadian community, 77% of respondents support choice, and 70% within the South Asian Canadian community respondents. Interestingly, voters, we just had a provincial election, voters for all 3 major BC parties also support choice. 92% of Conservative voters, where respondents were in favor of choice, 64% of BC NDP voters, and interestingly, even 64% of BC Green voters wanted choice. I also want to emphasize that the Coalition for Affordable Dependable Energy recognizes that we need to transition to renewable energy to address climate change. But our members believe that that transition needs to take place without damaging our economy and threatening jobs and losing jobs, or it won't work. Timing is everything, and now is not the time to effectively ban renewable natural gas and natural gas. Since Richmond Council voted to adopt the Zero Carbon Step Code and other measures, several things have changed. In 2023, BC imported $500 million worth of electricity from the United States and Alberta, much of it not from renewable energy. This year, the river levels and snowpacks are at their lowest level since 1970, making another huge import of electricity highly likely. And BC Hydro has not yet included the $16 billion cost of the Site C Dam in our electricity rates, nor the new call for energy. Then there's also inflation, which has changed dramatically. Construction costs, all costs have gone up. Lastly, the BC government has said it will eliminate the consumer carbon tax if the federal government removes the backstop legislation that requires each province across the country to have a carbon tax. That seems highly likely. If the consumer carbon tax is removed on renewable natural gas, natural gas prices will drop approximately 25%, making it even more affordable. At the same time, BC Hydro's ability to supply adequate electricity for new construction is under extreme stress without even considering the requirements for electric vehicle sales and charging stations coming up quickly. The Coalition has heard from many developers that they cannot get access to the electrical supply their customers need in new builds, both in small and large construction. And the electrical grid is not designed for the higher use of electricity or for the increased density that both the province and municipalities like Richmond are planning for. Also, the legislation allowing different municipalities to implement the Zero Carbon Step Code and the Energy Step Code earlier than the provincial deadline of 2030 has created a patchwork quilt of energy regulations, which your staff just demonstrated, which is massively confusing to both consumers, builders, and suppliers. What you can do in Richmond and Port Coquitlam, you cannot do in Richmond or Vancouver. Quebec had similar legislation allowing municipal opt-in or early adoption, and this year it stopped municipalities from having the right to implement ahead of the provincial regulations due to confusion and complication. In conclusion, the Coalition's members urge you to support option 3 as the only option to restore choice on energy and new construction and align with provincial legislation, which we support. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Sorry, there's no questions.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go online to Mike McNeese and then Naomi Leung. Are you here?
I am, yes. Thank you, Chair.
Just a minute. Hang on. Is Naomi Leung here? All right, if you could be ready to go right after this virtual presentation. All right, Mr. McNeese, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just working to get unmuted. Thank you, Chair and Council. My name is Mike McNeese. I'm Director of Public Affairs with the Hearth, Patio, and Barbecue Association of Canada. Our members include manufacturers, distributors, and retailers of hearth and barbecue products, and they operate across Canada. I'm speaking today on behalf of our members in favor of option 3. So thank you for the opportunity to speak at today's meeting. I know there's a long list of speakers for today's meeting, so I will keep my remarks brief. I want to give you some quick background, though, on our members. They include everyone from large manufacturers like Napoleon and Valor to mom and pop specialty retailers with 1 or 2 employees. They employ residents and support the local economy directly and indirectly. Our members already comply with extensive existing environmental regulations and are committed to addressing the reality of climate change. And it's important to note that modern hearth appliances are cleaner and more efficient. These are not sort of the simple steel boxes of decades past. Addressing climate change effectively should include increasingly renewable natural gas as part of the solution. And I feel, and our members feel, that Council made the right decision by reconsidering the early adoption of the top step of the BC Zero Carbon Step Code. And that option 3 will follow provincial guidelines, and locally it will simplify step code adoption. Different municipalities taking different approaches on different timelines only adds confusion to the market for consumers and adds significant hurdles for businesses. While ancillary appliances like gas fireplaces are not explicitly covered by the Zero Carbon Step Code, they are indeed affected. If gas isn't going into new development for space and water heating, the likelihood it will be piped in for a fireplace is slim to none. Speeding up the implementation of the step code has significant impacts. Following the provincial timelines will help businesses and the community in one clear way: time. Change takes time, innovation takes time. The market will adjust, our members will adapt, but they need time to do it. Consumer choice, affordability, and energy reliability need to be considered. Consumers want choice in their energy solutions, and that is clear. They certainly want reliability and a backup if the power goes out. And they also want an affordable option, especially now when affordability is a real concern for many people. So I urge you, please consider option 3 from the staff report. It follows the right path while giving residents and businesses more time to adapt. On behalf of our members, your attention to this matter is much appreciated, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with the City of Richmond going forward. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak today.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Naomi Leung. After that will be Judith Brooke. Is she here? Okay, if you could be ready to go. Go ahead.
Hello, Richmond City Council staff and community members. My name is Naomi Leung. I'm a 21-year-old resident living in the Williams and Shell Road area. When I first learned about the scale of the climate crisis, this was 4 years ago. From witnessing year after year of record-breaking global temperatures and mass deaths from flooding, extreme heat, and forest fires. At the time, I was in high school and I was deeply overwhelmed and disappointed by the cognitive dissonance between governments claiming to be climate leaders while buying fossil fuel pipelines, advancing extraction projects, and delaying climate action. But when I felt this anxiety, this hopelessness, I was relieved to find out that Richmond City Council voted to declare a climate emergency in 2020. That I was not alone, and that this city had people who cared enough to recognize a crisis and not deny it. In 2020, it was also around the time when anti-Asian racism increased during the pandemic. This is when I first delegated at Richmond City Council 4 years ago, imploring the city to adopt anti-racism policies. Issues like systemic racism, gender-based violence, and systems of oppression create barriers for people to take climate action. 2 years later, I returned to City Council in 2022 to ask the city to endorse the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2022. This treaty called on higher levels of government to create a binding plan to end the expansion of new coal, oil, and gas projects and manage a global transition away from fossil fuels. Today, I'm here again at City Council, remembering your promises, remembering how the city has declared a climate emergency in 2020, 4 years ago. Amidst witnessing global genocides and increasing mental health crises in our generation, I'm here asking for tangible climate justice actions for our city, for you to stick to the status quo or option one of strong climate policy. It is time for our city to do our part. For you, Richmond City Council, to be climate leaders, not climate deniers. Climate justice is a framework which recognizes the roots of climate change in systems of oppression and strives to dismantle these systems to build more equitable and livable futures. As I shared last month, the climate emergency is caused disproportionately by a small group of wealthier global north nations like Canada who emit the most global greenhouse gas emissions per capita. According to Jason Hickel's Quantifying National Responsibility for Climate Breakdown, 92% of excess emissions over planetary boundaries are spent by global north nations like Canada. Canada is a wealthy nation because of its violent histories and ongoing structures of colonization, extraction, and continual greenhouse gas emissions. The climate crisis is already here, harming lower income racialized and Indigenous populations hardest in Canada. The climate crisis is not a mythical or faraway problem. With heat domes killing our seniors, climate displacements from forest fires in Lytton, and extreme weather events happening in our ancestral home countries, we are afraid and we need action now. There are no disposable peoples, only people who are deemed disposable by systems of violence such as colonialism, such as capitalism, and in this case, climate delay. I need you, Richmond City Council, to understand that there are no borders in the atmosphere. We share the atmosphere, yet when our city emits greenhouse gas emissions and denies climate action, this is violence to Global South and lower income nations. Audre Lorde said, "There is no single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." So city councilors, I need you to understand how climate crisis is a symptom of colonialism, evidence of how cultures of extractivism are harming us. It's evidence that we need to change our relationship to the land. We need reciprocal relationships with the land, and we need to care for the land and each other. I need you to understand how the climate crisis has and does worsen disability injustices, racial injustices, and the material quality of life for lower income peoples. I'm asking you to look within your hearts, to look at history, and to see how we have a responsibility to our communities to build infrastructure that invests in our futures, in our future generations, and to take bold action because we have climate debt to the Global South and to our own communities. Please keep students, youth, and Global South nations and future generations in mind when considering the true cost of delaying climate action now. In all your policies and practices, remember the next generations that you're acting for, including your own families, your own children, and your own grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next speaker is Judith Brooke. After that will be Steve Kemp. Is Steve here? Okay, if you could be ready to go, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Judith Brooke, and as a resident of Metro Vancouver, excuse me, I'm here to support your implementation timeline of 2025. I am keen for a healthy environment in all of our municipalities. I'll speak with my words and then share a message from co-owner of Lane Fab Design Build, an engineer and master of architecture. In July, Council heard Councillor Hobbs' motion to reconsider Richmond's zero carbon step code current timeline. While Councillor Hobbs commented that moving to lowering GHG still remains a go, the thought that we somehow have extra time to take delayed action is just not an option that the environment can handle. Councillor Alexa Liu shared concern of if you are on electricity solely, you have no options. To be clear, the gas option causes emissions, which is killing us and our planet. We must electrify and have many renewable choices. Air source electric heat pumps have a coefficient of performance 3 times greater than baseboards and use less energy than either gas or baseboards. Your staff also mentioned this. Your staff also mentioned only a 1% rise in costs from one step code to another. And again, to repeat, the zero carbon step code applies to new builds, not to simply replacing your current energy source in an existing home. The more homes you build with emissions results in more future required retrofits. There are differences between the energy step code and zero carbon step code. You could build to the highest possible BC energy step code and still be emitting high levels of emissions. However, if you implement a high-level zero-carbon step code, you are actually limiting emissions, which is what the climate so desperately needs. Council spoke of having choices. Yes, your constituents want choices. The choice to breathe clean air, the choice to not be at the mercy of dikes to keep out the rising waters, the choice to leave a livable planet to their kids and grandkids. As of now, 29 local governments and First Nations have opted in, including 9 in Metro Vancouver. The majority of Metro Van municipalities have adopted EL3 or EL4 for Part 9 buildings, while implementation for Part 3 buildings varies between jurisdictions. Council has heard from young local kids on fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty a couple of years ago. At this time, this council showed their willingness to endorse its principles. Today is when you get to show those kids that council does actually care and believes in their right to a safe future, just like you said back then. BC Hydro recently presented to this council advising there is adequate energy available to Richmond throughout the next 10 years. As we heard on individual cases, there may be a need for upgrades to provide the needed power in a specific area for a specific project. Their statistics that you heard reflect that only 7% of connections are 400 amps or higher. Of those, a full 80% cost $25,000 or less to connect, with amounts over this being very unique occurrences. The April 2024 BC Hydro call for renewable power received proposals for 3 times more energy than was targeted, so we are very well placed going forward. You have the power in your hands to honor the memory of the over 600 MV residents who perished in the June 2021 heat dome, by continuing the meaningful environment work your council has achieved in the past by keeping to that current timeline. I'm now going to speak briefly with the words of Bryn Davidson, co-owner of Lane Fab Design Build. He states, my understanding is that this motion is about the timeline under which the city will adopt new step code requirements. To those ends, we, Lane Fab, as a company that specializes in low carbon construction, would support the fastest adoption possible. The systems and technology to build to a high level of step code are well understood. There is no new technology required, and many builders like Lane Fab have been doing it for more than a decade. The more buildings and cities we have on board, the easier it gets for everyone. The argument that fossil gas is a cost saver is simply not true. The lowest capital cost building is an all-electric building. These are his words, I remind you. The cost to build to a higher step code is marginal after the design and build teams have learned how to do it. We should focus more on training instead of trying to delay. We hope the City of Richmond will keep pushing forward because the path to climate action isn't impossible, but it does take effort from everyone, and time is of the essence. Bryn Davidson is an engineer and master of architecture. And I want you to consider this matter very carefully because, as I say, you could honor the lives of all those who perished with the promises you've made in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Steve Kemp. And then we have two people for the next one, Vanessa Connolly and Jason Wolf. Are they here? All right, we'll hear from you if you can be ready to go.
Mr. Chairman and Council, I'm glad to be here. I'm a net zero builder qualified. I built one of the first high-performance homes here in Richmond back in 2014 on Sunny Dean. It's there for you to have a look. And we just built one of the most high-performance homes in Burnaby just 2 years ago. So I've been in this since 1981. We built the first high-performance home in Ottawa. It was partly sponsored by the Ontario government, and it was an initiative to help reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. That was a time when Jimmy Carter was president, and he was also an advocate of this whole program. When Ronald Reagan came in, he said, this is just a pile of crap, and he wiped the whole thing out, and we went into an oil economy for the past 40 years. So that's how fragile this whole process is. And one of the big obstacles is just simply knowledge, and that's something that can be taught to everybody in the system. That goes from people giving out building permits, building inspectors, and so on. On two of the jobs that I mentioned, I'm the one teaching the building inspectors how to build it. And so there's definitely a lack of knowledge out there, but that's the only thing that is really stopping us from moving forward more quickly. And I think that when you look at how long we've been at this is 40 years ago, we were doing basically the same thing that we're doing today. The materials are better, the education is better. That's really the only difference. So it can be done. I think we should be accelerating as quickly as possible, but we have to make sure that the policies we put in place are backed up by the proper program internally. Because if we can't deliver, if we can't help the builders do a better job, then it's going to fall apart very quickly. So this is just knowledge, and there's materials that are improving all the time, and it's simply a case of saying we're going to do it and let's get doing it. So we don't have any more time, folks. We've already pissed away 40 years. So we're up against the wall now. We can see that, and we got to do something about it.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So Vanessa Connolly, Jason Wolf, if you can come forward. Is there two of you?
It'll be just me. And we did have a
Okay.
deck, but I can just go ahead.
The next
without it.
speaker is Olga Illich. Is she here? Sorry? She's online, and she's there. Okay, so she'll be next.
Great.
Please go ahead.
Great, and then there's a deck coming up here. Do I move that myself, or?
I don't know.
I do. It looks like I do. Okay. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Vanessa Connolly. I'm the Director of Community and Indigenous Relations at Fortis BC, and I'm grateful to be here today on the traditional and ceded territory of the Musqueam and the Hunkaminam speaking people, and appreciate the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. Today, I think Council has a fundamental question, which is, should residents in Richmond have a choice in how they heat their homes? And we strongly believe that they should. So we're here today to speak in support of option 3 from the staff report. This option permits choice and flexibility in energy use for residents and allows access to the gas system while ensuring that those who prefer electricity continue to have that option available. I want to spend a minute to talk about Fortis BC and our climate action plan. So we're the largest energy provider in British Columbia. We deliver natural gas, renewable natural gas, electricity, and propane to 1.2 million customers, including nearly 50,000 homes and businesses in the city of Richmond. I want to begin by sharing an update on our commitment to decarbonizing the gas system. Through our Clean Growth Pathway Climate Plan to 2050, we're investing in renewable gases, energy efficiency, and low-carbon transportation to help BC and the city meet our climate goals. We're investing $700 million over the next 4 years in energy efficiency and conservation management. Our renewable natural gas supply is expanding. We're continuing to secure renewable natural gas, including locally from farms and landfills. Fortis BC currently has 18 petajoules of supply under contract to 2030 of renewable natural gas, which, to put into perspective, is equivalent to the amount of energy that will be produced by the Site C dam. Restricting access to the gas system not only limits customer choices, but also removes another path for achieving greenhouse gas reductions in the city moving forward. Affordability, as we know, is a priority for British Columbians, and this chart shows the cost of natural gas and renewable gas on a kilowatt-hour basis compared to comparison for residential customers. Also want to acknowledge for Council the Premier's recent decision to repeal the retail carbon tax if a federal mandate is no longer in place. And we do estimate this single policy change could lower residential gas bills in the province by around 25%, which makes gas less than 1/3 the cost of electricity for the average residential customer. This decision reinforces the importance of affordable energy choices. I'm going to spend a moment talking about cooking. We know cooking with gas remains an important option for residents in the restaurant sector. I wanted to clarify that the cost implications of using gas only for cooking purposes with no allowance for space and water heating will make the connection to the gas system more cost prohibitive. An economic test based on expected gas usage determines the connection cost for new customers. So that means that current customers are not impacted by new customers connecting to the system. Customers seeking gas for only cooking would face a higher connection cost due to their minimal usage of the system. In other words, the cost of a gas connection requires an economic justification to be fair to all of our existing customers, and gas for cooking alone does not meet that economic test. Both the gas and electric systems are essential for meeting the province's energy needs, and that's evident during recent cold snaps when our customers' heating needs increase. The gas system delivered nearly double the energy of BC Hydro's electric system during peak demand, here shown in January 2024, which underscores the importance of maintaining access to the gas system. This reliability becomes even more essential as the demand for electricity continues to rise, not only from buildings, but also in the transportation sector to meet the growing demand for EVs. Aligning Richmond's energy policies with the province creates multiple decarbonization pathways, offering builders, developers, residents, and businesses with certainty. This alignment supports solutions like dual-fuel HVAC systems and the expanded use of low-carbon gases like renewable natural gas. Current regulations in the city restrict natural gas for space and water heating for homes and the opportunity to access these new technologies and energies over time. And in closing, we're urging Council to consider adopting option 3 to ensure Richmond residents have choice and access to affordable energy options. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker is Olga Illich, followed by Stephanie C. Is she here? Yes. Okay, if you could be ready to go after this virtual attendance. Okay. Olga Illich.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Good. I guess I don't want to go over things that other people have already gone over, but I do want to stress that change does take time. And most of you know that I was, at least the council will know, that I was part of the Gordon Campbell government that brought in the carbon tax in 2008. And so, you know, I've been dealing with this for quite some time. I drive an electric car. I was on the board of a company called Finovera Energy, which was building windmills to generate power in the Peace region. That sort of died. And I was also for a while on the board of Shark Energy, which uses wastewater recovery systems to generate electricity. About 3 years ago, we put in one of their systems in an apartment building that I built with partners in Vancouver. And just let me say that it's a lot of technology to move to carbon-free buildings is easier to do in multiple family buildings, such as apartments, and it's easier than in single-family homes. And that is where we are with Part 9 buildings, which are mostly single-family homes. I'm just going to try to be brief and focus on the affordability for homeowners, that a home that allows only electricity, which is where the City of Richmond has been since October 2023 with the adoption of level EL4 of the Zero Carbon Step Code. And that's where the province wants to be in 2030. And I'll just try to give you some costs, which I think actually Fortis may just have done, but right now to deliver 10 gigajoules of heat to provide hot water and heat to a home is with gas is $145. And a house uses about 90 gigajoules a year. So that is $1,305 per year. If the carbon tax comes off, then that's going to be a lot less, and there'll be about $900 for gas for heat and hot water. That compares to $410 or $3,690 per year for a house that uses only electricity. And that's a big difference. That's $2,790 more per year for heating and hot water for electric compared to electricity. I'm sorry, for electricity compared to gas. And that's a roughly $230 a month. So I'm not sure that council wants to tell homeowners in Richmond that the cost of heating their home and providing hot water will cost them 4 times as much as it will cost most of the other homeowners in their neighborhood who continue to use gas. And that's what we would be doing with a new home. Or that it will cost that much more to live in Richmond or move to Richmond compared to other cities which would have not adopted the STEP code and are following the provincial guidelines, cities like Surrey, Delta, and Langley. And that is what, and that's before BC Hydro raises the rates because of Site C. They're either going to have to raise the rates to pay for Site C and the new call for power that they just had, or they are going to put it on the taxpayers, but it has to be paid for. So I think that you're going to be hearing from Barry Penner shortly. He's trying to get to you to attend. I think he's stuck in traffic, he tells me, but he has been looking at the various options on a more holistic basis. And I think that's one of the problems that we're having here. The energy step codes were put in place by the province in order to deal with the fact that BC Hydro needs to catch up and be able to provide the energy and electricity, and they don't have that at the moment. The infrastructure is not there. We keep losing power when there's an event and even when there isn't an event. I'm currently living in Vancouver. I'd like to come back to Richmond, where I grew up and where I went to school and where most of my family lives. And just a few months after I moved there, at Christmas time, all of a sudden the power went off. I had the whole family there for Christmas, power gone. Luckily, we had gas, and so we were able to complete the dinner. But that's the sort of thing that happens on a regular basis in Vancouver, where the infrastructure is aged and they need to replace that. They're using overhead power lines, and Richmond is doing that in a lot of places too. So I think that we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on if we draw more power for our homes and for electric cars. And so I'm urging you not to go to step 2, but to go to step 3, so that we have, as builders and as homeowners, have time to catch up to where BC Hydro is going to go. And that's going to take us to 2030. But you are at 2030 now with the EL4, and that is difficult for us to deal with and expensive for us to deal with. So please go to option 3 and follow the provincial timeline. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next speaker is Stephanie C. If you could come on up, and then Eva Jen.
Hello, I'm Stephanie C., a Richmond teacher. I spoke on October 1st as well. I urge you to keep our zero carbon step code the same, or maybe accelerate it as Port Moody has done and allow some exemptions for builders who are having trouble with compliance. The reason why I ask is because an open door policy on pollution means that someone could knock down my parents' 30-year-old house with gas in it, gas fireplace, gas heating, gas stove, and then they could install another gas system. They could build a bigger house, which is likely in my neighborhood with its high housing values. And then they can sell that house, and it's a gas guzzler, and we'll be stuck with it for the lifetime of the house. And it will be the occupant, not the developer, who ends up paying the cost, as well as the taxpayers. And I'm going to respond to some of the comments earlier from the last 2 speakers. I'd like to remind you about a redacted BC gas report, which was commissioned by Fortis BC, the BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, and the BC Bioenergy Network. And this was in 2023, in March. And the report said that heat pumps are 6 to 8 times more efficient than gas, and that electricity is the path towards decarbonization. One of the problems with RNG is, according to the report, that there is not enough of it because it's, I believe, from burning garbage, and we want to recycle most of our garbage. I'm not too sure on the science. And I'd like to also read out some comments from Alex Jameson, who emailed you his full email, but I'm not sure if you would have seen it in the many emails that came. Alex was a City of Richmond planner for 29 years, and he couldn't join us tonight, so he gave me permission to read this out. The main point of this email is to remind you that Richmond is not going to win any awards for going backward on the STEP code. I'll just read part of it. The reasons for even considering this retrograde step are not valid. 1, affordability. This is a short-term argument. Gas heating may be affordable now, but when it comes to new construction, gas furnaces do not provide cooling. Electric heat pumps are the most efficient way of providing air conditioning. There is no guarantee that gas heating will always be cheaper than other options. 2, energy supply concerns. I do not understand why the statement that only 19% of our building heating is currently supplied by electricity is valid. I thought we were talking about the future. BC Hydro has many options for increasing supply, such as wind, geothermal, or solar. 3, transition fuel is not a valid term. I think it is a term invented by the gas industry. Any way you look at it, natural gas is simply methane, usually produced by fracking. It is as bad as coal. 4, choices. People should not be given the choice of buying a new building which is polluting our environment. It is the job of government to protect us and our environment. Please maintain your resolve to stick with the accelerated adoption of the zero carbon step code. And to give some context to how we are doing in a broader worldwide sense, Canada's emissions are still going up. The rate of increase has slowed a bit, but is still going up. Meanwhile, countries like Costa Rica, Portugal, and Kenya have become 90% run on renewable energy or more. And Kenya has 56 million people. I know they're a very hot country and solar works very well for them, but still, it's really impressive. And the EU in general has a downward trend of emissions. About the arguments about needing a gas, I think I'm out of time, sorry. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Eva Jen, and then Dana Westermark. Is Dana here? Okay, Dana, if you could be ready to go.
Good evening to all the members of Richmond City Council. My name is Eva, and I'm here today to ask you to keep Richmond Zero Carbon Step Code. This code, which will restrict new homes from using natural gas, is important to fight climate change and protect our future. We can see the effects of global warming everywhere: melting glaciers, rising temperatures, and more frequent wildfires and heat waves. This past summer, wildfires in Canada burned more land than any year on record, releasing carbon dioxide and worsening climate change. Beyond the environmental impacts, air pollution from gas use also harms our health. New research has shown that air pollution from gas use, especially gas stoves, shaves 2 years off the lives of 40,000 citizens of Europe and Britain per year. Residents are twice as likely to die prematurely from exposure to gas stove pollutants compared to dying from car crash. And we all fear car crashes. In addition, gas stoves lead to more than 1 million cases of asthma per year. These children's asthma cases cause about $4.3 billion in additional health spending. Climate change also affects mental health, especially in young people. Many of us are anxious and worry about our future. According to a survey in The Lancet, 85% of young people are at least moderately worried, and 58% are very or extremely worried. This anxiety can lead to depression, insomnia, and stress, affecting our ability to focus on school, work, and relationships. As a student in Richmond, I think about these issues every day. I worry about rising temperatures, pollution, and the possibility of depleting resources like clean water and fuel. According to Clean BC, our summer will be longer and hotter, with more intense and frequent heat waves. In 2021, over 600 people in BC died during the heat dome. During the recent heavy rains, 4 people died in the lower mainland. I fear that something worse could happen here if we don't take action. I am not only concerned for myself, but also for future generations who will call Richmond home. I know this council cares about all residents, especially young people and minority communities who are often the most affected by climate change. Keeping the zero carbon step code is an important step towards a healthier, more sustainable Richmond. Allowing natural gas in new homes would raise emissions when we could be working to reduce them, making the future less safe. By keeping this policy, Richmond can set an example and show real leadership in protecting the environment. I kindly ask that you keep the current zero carbon step code in place or make it even stronger. This would demonstrate Richmond's commitment in reducing emissions, improving air quality, and supporting the health of future generations. By realizing this vision, Richmond could become known as a model for environmental responsibility and leadership, inspiring other cities to follow. I'd like to finish by showing my friends Tessa's climate change poster. She drew it herself to spread awareness about this issue, and it reminds us all that young people want to see real change. Together, we can make Richmond a model for action on climate, not just for us, but for everyone. Thank you for considering the younger generation's voice and helping to create a safer, healthier Richmond for everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker is Dana Westermark. And then after that, Rosalind Rain Dancer. Is Rosalind online?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Okay, sir, go ahead.
I'm Dana Westermark. I long since 1986, a resident of Richmond. I own an energy company similar to the City of Richmond's Lulu District Energy Utility. We serve thousands of customers here in the Lower Mainland and in the BC interior. Big part of that business is ensuring that people have reliable, safe heating and cooling systems for their homes. One of the challenges one has with an electric-only system is that there are occurrences where we have power outages. We have interruptions to power. That interruption can last from a short period of time to days on end. While in the Lower Mainland you have limited risk of people dying from the energy being out, in the interior we have serious concerns. We have situations where a building at minus 30 degrees loses power. It doesn't take very long for the building to get cold and to put people's lives at risk. So we always have backup systems for the the principal electrical system, and natural gas is the energy source of choice for the backup systems. You use it for two primary things. One is recovering from an outage, and the other is so the temperature of the building starts to drop during an outage. You need natural gas to help you boost it back up to get to normal temperature again. You also have to have occasions where equipment fails, and you need to operate with the natural gas while you repair or replace that equipment. And sometimes those outages for equipment failures can last days. So, just in terms of having redundancy, having a safe operating system, having access to natural gas is a critical element. Looking down the road for future concerns, Capacity and distribution are issues that we discuss with Hydro on a regular basis. We're already finding that we need to use natural gas in some sites simply to avoid having to put in a unit substation, which is a $500,000 cost, or in cases where there simply isn't adequate distribution in terms of the overhead wiring to service a site with enough power to deal with the full demand, so we supplement with natural gas. As a general rule, we try to do the greenest system we possibly can, and we use geo-exchange in most of the systems that we use. In our Hamilton project, we were attempting to get to net zero on that project, but Hydro doesn't have sufficient distribution in the area to allow us to do photovoltaic solar and feed power back into the grid. So we simply weren't able to do the solar array that we wanted to do because there just isn't enough capacity there for the distribution system. That project we have managed to install EV chargers for every single unit in the building, but we just can't add the PV. With climate change, there's been mention today of concerns around climate change, and I think we all share those concerns, but windstorms like today are going to become more common and more severe. So natural gas provides a backstop to the instances where hydro is interrupted and there are prolonged power outages. The other issue is the ability of the industry to adapt to all of the changes that are being imposed on us. And over the last 4 years, we've had an incredible rush of change. Everything from the BC Building Code changes, the STEP code change, the carbon code, seismic changes, accessibility, and many more, and they're coming fast and furious. The industry needs some time to adapt to all of those changes, and the impacts that we're experiencing are availability of the expertise to do the work is a problem. The cost of implementing all of these changes and the impact of multiple layers of change, adding complexity to buildings, making them more difficult to build, taking longer to build them. So, in a situation where we're trying to provide as much housing as we possibly can, I think it's incumbent upon every level of government to do what they can to remove barriers to housing and allow the industry the time to adapt to these things. So I'm asking Council to consider adopting option 3. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going online to Rosalind Raindancer and then Bruce Murdoch, who's also online. If you could check.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Rosalind Raindancer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council. Good afternoon. I'm Roz Raindancer, holistic realtor. I grew up in Richmond. My mission is helping people to find a place of home where they can belong, grow, and thrive. And today I want to speak to the benefits of building more energy efficient homes from the perspective of consumer demand and economics, because increasingly what I'm seeing is all of my clients, when given the option, would choose more energy efficient systems because they understand that it's better for the environment and actually saves them money in the long run. They also understand that they're healthier to live in, especially for people with health concerns. There is growing evidence that gas stoves, for example, can be damaging to health. And not only are they more affordable in the long term, that saves them, those energy bills. People are not thinking just about the cost of purchasing, but also the cost of maintaining and operating their home. They also are increasingly, climate change being a growing concern in the consumer's mind year after year. I don't have to emphasize that. It's been said over and over by a few number of delegates here. We know that heat pumps and other efficient systems cut emissions, and that adds real value to properties as well. Buyers love it. I see it all the time, and it is a huge selling point. So in conclusion, I urge the council to prioritize and accelerate energy efficiency in new developments, And so let's build a legacy of homes that serve our community well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this vision.
Thank you. We'll now go to Bruce Murdoch, and then after Bruce is Sunil Singhal. Okay, if you can be ready.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm a home builder of single-family homes and multifamily homes, and we build all-electric homes to EL4, the highest level of the zero-carbon step code. I spoke to Council a month or so ago about the affordability of upfront costs and operating costs, and our personal experience is that upfront costs are similar to gas plus air conditioning. In fact, ours is a little bit lower, a little bit cheaper to go all electric. And then our annual operating energy costs are proving out to be about 20 to 25% lower. But today I want to address two electrical questions that frequently come up. One is, do I need to install a large service such as a 325 amp or 400 amp service when going to an all electric plus having an EV? And the other question is BC Hydro able to supply the increased demand? So regarding the electrical service, as we build more and more efficient homes, energy step codes 4 and 5, the electrical loads decline quite considerably. So that means a smaller heat pump, for instance. In my own home, we run a heat pump off a 25 amp circuit, which is a quite small circuit. Gas furnace requires 15 amp circuit for the air handler for a forced air furnace. So the incremental service is extra is quite small. Rule of thumb is that if you build a house with air conditioning, you need about that amount for your service. So really, there's no real change if a house already has air conditioning, because a heat pump is very, very similar. And if you use heat pump for hot water, you'll need even less than with an electric water tank. And then similarly, if you use a condensing dryer or a heat pump dryer, you'll be a huge decline in demand for clothes drying. So what about the EV? There's a technique that we use for EVs where we share a circuit with the clothes dryer. So we'll have, whenever the EV is charging, it charges all the time until the clothes dryer is flipped on. And then it takes the power there to run the cycle for the dryer. So it's the same circuit. So we don't have to add anything more to the panels. It's called a circuit splitter. So bottom line, electric home can be serviced by 100 amps if really carefully designed in an energy efficient home. However, what we do is we install 200 amps in all single family homes, including homes with a secondary suite. And there's plenty of power for that and for future additional requirements. With regard to supply from BC Hydro, I can't speak for what BC Hydro is doing to increase generation transmission capacity, but I can tell you what we're doing at the house construction level that reduces loads and shifts loads from peak times to off-peak times. And reducing loads is just a more energy efficient design. We use heat pump hot water tanks. We use energy efficient heat pumps. We use heat pump clothes dryers. We use induction cooktops and solar panels. And these all reduce power consumption by a lot and exponentially in some cases. And shifting loads, then that's going to be critical to BC Hydro's ability to supply. For 19 or 20 hours of a day, BC Hydro has a huge amount of excess capacity in both generation and transmission. The challenge is in the peak hours from 4 to 9 p.m. So the entire system revolves around meeting those peak hour demand hours. So what BC Hydro has done is they've introduced a time of day option in which peak hours are charged extra and nighttime is charged less. So what we can do is we will shift our loads to off-peak times, run the clothes dryer in off-peak times, charge the EV at nighttime. At these lower rates, I can add 450 kilometer range to my EV for $5. Turn off the hot water heater from 4 to 9 and heat it up at nighttime. And then the other thing is that BC Hydro has a rebate for solar and stationary batteries, $5,000 for each. So you can fill the battery up from solar, then run the house from a battery from 4 to 9 and pay no peak hour prices at all. And then that battery can also take over when there's power outages. So bottom line, what we're finding is that new electric homes have demand loads that are reasonably similar to existing 10-year, 15-year-old homes when we apply the best strategies. And Our experience is electric homes are easy to build. So the learning curve is not that huge. There's plenty of resources out there for builders to get up to speed and learn how to build these homes efficiently and cost effectively. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next speaker then is Sunil Singhal, and after that, Sharon Dodd. Is Sharon here?
She's online.
Okay, she is online. Okay, Sharon is online apparently. Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you. Hello again, Mayor and Council. My name is Sunil, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Stand Earth and in favor of the status quo option. As a gentle reminder, the Zero Carbon Step Code is not a ban on gas, has nothing to do with gas barbecues or fireplaces, and still allows for backup systems even at the highest level. The policy is to make mechanical systems more efficient in new buildings and, by extension, reducing energy bills. We are in an affordability crisis after all. At the last meeting I spoke at, there were a few of you who wanted to better understand what other local governments have put forward in regards to the Zero Carbon Step Code. I submitted a document showing the proposed timelines for Richmond and compared it to other leading municipalities in the Lower Mainland, as well as the rest of BC. If you had a chance to look at it, you'll see Richmond's current Zero Carbon Step Code timeline puts the municipality within a similar range of other local governments across British Columbia, similar to what staff just spoke to. If option 2 or 3 move forward, Richmond would be out of step with its neighbors and other local governments across BC. I also just want to speak to why this is so important to so many. Buildings and transportation are the biggest contributors to GHG emissions in cities. In Richmond, buildings account for nearly 40%. We've seen with climate change how our hot summers are increasingly becoming. During the 2021 heat dome, so many people lost their lives, especially seniors at home. By keeping with the original timeline, it ensures that new homes built in 2025 and not years later down the road have heat pumps that not only provide heating, but also air conditioning, which is becoming so important. Lastly, I would just like to mention that the groups advocating for the delay of the Zero Carbon Step Code have been pro-fossil fuel lobby groups, such as BC CADE, which we heard from earlier, and Fortis BC, which have been showing up at council meetings across BC, like this one. The builders who spoke today have not called for the delay of the Zero Carbon Step Code. I would like to point out that this idea of protecting choice being proposed by these fossil fuel lobbyists are more or less whether we want to keep polluting in our home. I would hope we wouldn't argue that people should have the choice to insulate with asbestos or decorate with lead paint or build high-rises without fire escapes. Using natural gas is a similarly becoming an obsolete choice because safer, more sustainable alternatives like heat pumps are readily available. I urge Richmond to stay the course with their current evidence-based approach and originally proposed timeline. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go now online to Sharon Dodd. And then Ian Tostenson, is he here?
I don't see him.
He's not here. Okay, then it'll be Shayna Furlong who's here. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, dear Mayor and Council members. I felt compelled to speak to you today as a Richmond resident, health professional, and environment advocate. I've lived in Richmond for my entire life and have also served the community sincerely as a family doctor for 24 years. I've witnessed our community transform from only 3 high-rise buildings at Minaroo Park to a bustling urban center with a cityscape visible from far away. However, many of my patients and personal friends have been priced out of Richmond. And sadly, our own youth, including some of the university students who have spoken earlier today, will not be able to afford single-family homes and duplexes in Richmond. This vote today will only affect the affluent few who can afford these types of homes. The wealthy already contribute disproportionately to global warming. I feel strongly that our priority should not be giving choices to the privileged, but the health and well-being of all. Methane is released during the production, storage, and distribution of natural gas, including renewable natural gas. Methane is 80 times stronger a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, therefore contributing significantly to global warming. Any new gas hookup today locks that dwelling into 50 years of guaranteed methane emissions. I believe that government is responsible to enact strict standards that protects its citizens and the environment. Just like it's my responsibility as a family doctor to protect the health of my patients. As part of a generation that should have known better, let's take this opportunity to fix our wrongs. The decision of the vote today will be shared on news outlets around the country. So I implore you to get out of your comfort zone and send a strong message loud and clear that Richmond is a climate leader by voting for option 1 or staying with status quo. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll now go to Shayna Furlong. Now, is Barry Penner online?
Yes.
He is online. Okay, so he'll be the last speaker after this one.
Thank you, Mayor Brody, Council. My name is Shayna Furlong. I'm here in my capacity as President and CEO of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce. Richmond, like much of BC, is facing a dual crisis: climate change and housing affordability. For employers and workers in Richmond, the questions are, can I afford a home? How can I pay my bills? And how do we keep Richmond livable for future generations? Addressing both of these issues effectively is critical. British Columbia as a whole is moving very quickly toward a net zero standard that will meet the provincial target that all new buildings must be net zero energy ready by 2032. And BC introduced Canada's first and only zero carbon step code. Yes, the province has received some pushback for moving too quickly, but British Columbians want to protect our planet for ourselves and our future generations. For context, I believe our neighbors in Alberta are targeting 2050. But within BC, where yes, we already struggle with high land and housing costs, we are putting our money where our mouth is and moving quickly. When the entire province moves to, for instance, Energy Step Code 5 and Zero Carbon Step Code 4 by 2032, there's a certain economy of scale. More trained designers, engineers, contractors, and architects who can work to this standard because it is the standard, making zero carbon readiness more affordable, efficient, and accessible. There won't be a comparison for prospective home builders or buyers between one municipality that might have less stringent requirements in Richmond, because the playing field will be level within BC. The energy transition does put a certain strain on our existing electrical infrastructure and power generation. BC Hydro announced this year a $57 billion investment plan in new power generation, transmission, and distribution facilities. But it takes time, and reaching our highest step code standards by 2032 aligns more closely with their roadmap, providing the necessary runway for infrastructure upgrades and energy security. And unfortunately, our BC Hydro capacity is not currently sufficient to meet our energy needs. In 2023, BC imported about a fifth of its electricity, which is about 10,000 gigawatts, much of it from Alberta. In the meantime, our existing energy infrastructure, coupled with a hybrid of natural gas or renewable natural gas and electric power, gives homeowners insulation from demand surges during peak periods. And just to correct a bit of a misconception earlier, I had the opportunity to tour the Metro Vancouver Lulu Island wastewater treatment RNG facility. And not just burning garbage, but unfortunately wastewater is a biological reality, which does create gas. When they off-gas, they used to create a 10-meter flame right here on Lulu Island. Now it's actually being used to heat homes, which is pretty cool. Now, does this mean home builders and homeowners only wish to build to the minimum required standard? Of course not. As in all things, they'll be weighing the upfront construction costs with the long-term benefits and their values. And there are already partners who can help them do so, like Van City and some of the builders we heard from today. But let's be clear, the economic reality is that housing starts have dropped significantly, with a 22.5% decrease this August compared to 2023. This is due to many factors, but underscores the challenges facing the industry now. In Metro Vancouver alone, an estimated 50,000 new residents each year will need new homes. By aligning with the provincial policy, we're committing to both our climate and our housing goals. It's about maintaining a level playing field across BC municipalities, supporting builders with stable, achievable targets, and ensuring that Richmond remains a top choice for new families, businesses, and sustainable development. So let's support an approach to help build housing supply, normalize costs, and honor the very progressive approach that BC is taking on climate. By following the province's standards, Richmond can lead as a sustainable, attractive, and future-ready community. I thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you. And the final speaker, the final delegation is Barry Penner, who is online.
I was.
No?
Where do I speak, sir?
Here, just have a seat. I spoke too soon.
Councillor Cash? Good to see you. Good evening. I was fighting my way through traffic and there was a typical backup at the tunnel, but pleased to be with you in person. I was able to monitor many of the presentations via audio, so thank you to your staff for that. I also prepared a short PowerPoint deck. Unfortunately, I was told it was unable to be uploaded for your benefit, but will be distributed to council members subsequent to this meeting. As some of you will know, and certainly Councillor Cash will remember, I was a Minister of Environment in British Columbia, and I had the honor of introducing British Columbia's first climate action plan, and along with the Minister of Finance, Carol Taylor at the time, we introduced the carbon tax, the first broad-based carbon tax in North America. So I've watched with some dismay as many of our expectations and hopes did not prove successful. The initiatives that we launched were did not result in the reductions we thought were going to happen. And it continues to be that case today. British Columbia's greenhouse gas emissions are still rising, despite many efforts. And that's just the practical reality of what's happening in our economy. I think I heard one of the presenters say that during cold spells, for example, 70% of our heating in British Columbia comes from natural gas sources, and that's true. But what many people overlook is that on an average basis annually, electricity itself accounts for only 17% of our actual energy consumption. 83% comes from other sources. So to keep our economy going, hospitals functioning, schools, and transportation, et cetera, takes a whole lot of energy besides electricity. To try and displace that other 83% with electricity only is, well, more than a daunting task. A 500% increase is not going to happen within the next few decades. It's just unfortunately not possible. So it really comes down to the art of what's realistic and what's possible. And in our case, in British Columbia, despite our best efforts, we are struggling. It's unpopular to say it, but we have become dependent on our neighbors in recent years for electricity imports, for that 17% of our energy demand. In the most recent financial reports filed by BC Hydro just before the Labor Day weekend, they acknowledged spending not $500 million, as one of your previous presenters talked about, that was for last year on imports, but $1.4 billion with a B on electricity imports on a net basis when we imported the equivalent of, well, 14,000 gigawatt hours, which is almost 3 Site C dams worth of electricity in the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. And as you know, we've continued to be in a situation where we just don't have the water supply that we would like to have in an average year. So BC Hydro's continued to import electricity this summer and into the fall, and made extensive use of a natural gas power plant in addition on Vancouver Island to keep the electricity flowing. So that's what's happening at a macro level. We have huge increases in electricity demand that are anticipated, more than we've seen in generations. This is not just impacting us, it's happening across the border, which is why I'm so concerned about us being dependent on our neighbors. Yes, we've been importing electricity, and that was necessary, so I'm not faulting BC Hydro for doing that. But as a long-term strategy, it's not prudent. And even when Site C comes online, we'll still be in a situation where we're importing electricity. And there's a recent call for power, and yes, we've had numerous proposals come forward. We don't know how many of those are realistic, how many will actually go forward, when they will come online or be completed, and much, just as importantly, what they will cost. So that's the high-level information. Just today, I saw a letter by utilities in Washington State to their regulators saying it will require a moonshot to try and meet the electricity demands that are being imposed by decarbonization efforts south of the border in Washington State. That was signed by the largest utilities, and it was submitted last week. So they're really trying to figure out how they're going to square the puzzle, and increasing pressure on the electricity system here does put a real concern about the future supply in my mind. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so those are the delegations. Staff, is there, come on back. So why don't you just stay here as we go through this, but do you have anything to add based on what you've just heard?
Nothing further to add. Open for questions.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
If I could, I would note one thing. Councillors have noted the information through the chair. About 17% of BC's energy coming from electricity. That's true, but it's a measure of energy consumption. It's not a measure of useful energy. And so when we think of that, we need to keep in mind that a lot of the energy that we use in British Columbia is gasoline, it's diesel, it's biomass. So the energy conversion rate of diesel and gasoline is about 30%. The rate of energy conversion of biomass is also well less than 50%. So we don't actually have to generate 5 times as much electricity to meet our energy needs, because when we switch from fossil fuels to electricity, the amount of energy that we need to consume to produce the energy that we need goes down dramatically. And so it is more akin to a doubling, perhaps a tripling of our electricity generation, which is, you know, that's significant, but it's not what that statistic would lead you to believe, because it's a measurement of consumption, including the inefficient use of energy, as opposed to our energy needs.
Can you comment on this issue of the backup was raised? Okay, when we get to the highest levels, will there be gas backup?
Through the chair, I think if I understand what you're asking, that's the administrative change that we made in June to allow backup gas if desired in a system that's primarily heat pump based, electric heat pump, and that largely came as a request of some builders that wanted to have that option with in-floor radiant heat in their single attached and duplex homes. So we looked at that, and there is a provision to do that. And so it's, if you haven't sized or designed your heat pump system maybe to be at a highest efficiency level, you may in some days need to rely on the backup gas or have that option to do that. In most cases, I'd say categorically, heat pumps are at least 300 or more % efficient. So with one input of electricity, you get 3 units of output out of that. And the models are getting more and more efficient over time. So it's a really good use of electricity in the province is the heat pump based systems. So I can say that categorically across the board. That's why there's incentives on this. That's why the transition for heating and cooling in buildings is largely heat pump based.
All right. I'm not seeing any buttons pushed to discuss, so we can go to a motion if someone has one, but whatever. We'll go to Councillor Heed.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, let me tell you something. I'm conflicted here. Mutually inconsistent feeling on this. We've heard both sides of the equation, and I don't disagree with any side of the equation on this. And rather than turning this into a win-lose, Mayor, I guess I'm looking for a win-win here at the end, and I know a couple of our other councillors do have some ideas to move this to a win-win. We have the builders of single-family and duplexes here, and you can understand what they're going through at the end. We've heard from our young people and our academics that teach our young people on how we have to be cognizant of the future. We heard the former Attorney General here, who's got a wealth of knowledge in this area, give us a empirical background on what's going on here. So a couple of areas that I just want to hit on is you gave an average total construction costs, and I think it was $425 a square foot, and that's one of the slides I think we were going to bring up, but if we can't, we all have copies of it. Can you just expand on where that data came from, and is that from one source, or have we done a meta-analysis to determine that's what the cost would be?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I refer this to my sustainability project manager to provide some detail and some further work that's happened today just in terms of modeling.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Heed. The figure of $425 per square foot is a median value of construction as of 2024. That was taken from a number of sites, customer-facing sites on the cost of new housing in the Lower Mainland. So understand that there's a wide range there. The costing increment of building to steps 3, 4, and 5 is taken directly from the most recent Energy Step Code costing report that was commissioned by the province. That was done in 2022. In 2022, code minimum was step 1. And so the cost increment to build to step 3 was 1.1% of construction costs. To step 4 was 1.4, if memory serves, and to step 5 was it
2.7.
2.7%.
So is that based on an actuary analysis, or we're just going by the dollar, or what it would be today to be at that?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, that study that was done took about a year, and it looked at every climate zone in BC, every form of housing, Part 3, Part 9, the step levels, energy step code levels, and looked at incremental costs and the costs that could be or would be reflected in that region in terms of availability and all that. So they derived incremental costs for each step code as you go up the staircase to the top level of efficiency. And this was reviewed at the STEPCO Council. So at the STEPCO Council, this is all the representatives of anybody who would have a voice on the energy step codes in BC is there, including local governments and lots of home builder association developers, both utilities, on and on. So lots of debate about it and lots of reaction to those figures, but it was a comprehensive study and commissioned by the province. Now, maybe not everybody agrees, well, my costs are less. Oh, no, that cost can't be right.
I think we got your...
It's higher than that.
We got your gist.
Anyways, there was debate about that, but it was the most comprehensive that we could look at.
Okay, just a couple more, Mayor, and then you can move on here. Is if someone has a system in place, a boiler system in place, and that system goes down, do they have to put in something without natural gas if they're fixing that, or can they go back to a boiler system and keep the natural gas?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, no, they do not. The Energy Step Code and the Zero Carbon Step Code apply only to new construction. In 2030, the province says that they will introduce the high energy efficiency standard. So government has said that in 2030, if that were to happen, then you would need to replace that with a heat pump, but that has not been enacted yet.
Okay, last comment, and this is just a comment. Here's my complete and utter doubt on whether hydro can sustain what's required here. And Councillor, or Queen's Counsel, Mr. Penner, outlined this quite well. Is I have significant concerns. Hydro could not come here today and provide some additional information with respect to being able to reach the capacity that may be required if in fact we went with the status quo going forward. We heard what Washington State, the problems that they're having on this. And so I guess from my point of view, I'm not convinced, unfortunately, that hydro will have the capacity to meet the demand that would be required if we're stuck to the status quo. So I'd like to hear from a couple other councillors who have some comments on this. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. On page GP 140, under supplemental electrical information, staff have reported that even though on September 16th, BC Hydro presented its electrification strategy, and they committed to providing supplemental information related to the local regional grid capacity. But then staff were notified by BC Hydro that this information will not be available for tonight's meeting. Do you have any extra information on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Day. Yeah, what staff did to, I guess, compensate for that was to look at the all the materials that we've had or been distributed from BC Hydro, the website, and that kind of information, pull that together. And we've looked at kind of what the plans were in terms of improving over time capacity for peak electrical load in Richmond. So some of those figures are provided on GP 140 in local electrical capacity and network reliability. With the good news, I guess, that once Hydro completes its planned investments, which it has plans for at the Steveston and Kidd 2 substations, total electrical capacity would increase accordingly, providing more buffer room, I guess, in terms of that percentage of total installed capacity that peak load would hit.
All right.
So-
Anything to add?
Just to be clear, BC Hydro was unable to provide that information for us because of the provincial election campaign. They're essentially covered by election blackout rules.
Well,
Sure.
2032 is a long ways away, and that's when the Steveston and Kidd number 2 substations would be built, according to the website, which is the best we can get from, BC Hydro right now. So I'm of the mind that given that we don't even have the full information that we need, the smart thing to do is status quo, leave it alone, and let's wait for BC Hydro to get back to us. But I have submitted a proposal for a motion that would refer to staff to create a policy that allows council to consider exceptions on a case-by-case basis to allow new homes to have gas hookup if BC Hydro cannot provide the electrical service that is required. And I have my rationale down here as well. I was wondering if staff could possibly comment on that. Should have handed out before, sorry.
Okay, a brief comment for the staff.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to Councillor Hobbs while you're looking at that. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Well, first, thanks to staff for this updated report and reports in the past as well. And thank you to the delegations in person and virtually who have come forward, regardless of what your position is. It's always good to have a diversity of opinion and hear what people are thinking. Today, though, I just want to emphasize that we're not talking about whether or not to do energy step codes or zero carbon step codes. We're just talking about the timeline. So make no mistake, anybody who's listening, Richmond is going in that direction because it's required and it's the right thing to do. So we're just talking about the timeline today. And I did bring forward the issue of, that is in option 3, of following the provincial government's step code guideline that they included with their regulation and policy in the first place. And you can find that on GP 150. We referred to it earlier. It's got the timeline and it explains it kind of visually quite well. So I just have a few comments through the chair, if you can bear with me. When you talk about generally Richmond's climate leadership and climate goals and what we're doing, I think it's really important not just to focus on this issue, but to look at our community emission plan, the Community Energy Emission 2050 plan. That came through council a couple of years ago. It was one of the first major reports that I had to go through, and I commented at the time and since that it's one of the most outstanding reports that we have in the city. It's very progressive. It has a lot of information in it, but broadly speaking, it has 8 strategic directions, about 77 fundamental steps that follow that, and about 199 related steps that follow that. And it deals with a broad spectrum of issues, including what we're talking about tonight. So we did declare climate emergency in Richmond back in, I think, 2019, before I was on council, and I fully support that declaration and believe that it's completely viable. The issue remains that to achieve our climate goals, many things have to fall into place. And for me, just broadly speaking, the climate solutions on a global level are going to involve a lot of advances in technology when it comes to things like carbon capture, sequestering that carbon. It's going to include things like improvement in battery storage when you have electrical systems providing your power, direct carbon capture, even direct carbon capture at the source, but also out of the atmosphere itself is something people are looking at. Nuclear power in different jurisdictions might be part of the solution. Hydrogen is another one. So there's many things at play. And our SEEP report does comment on many of those, and it's very multifaceted. I just want to go to one related issue that actually, in my mind, is relevant, and that's the housing crisis. Yes, there's a climate emergency. I totally agree with that. We also have a housing crisis in not just Richmond, but BC and in Canada. And accelerating the timeline in this particular instance does have some practical considerations that we should think about and how it impacts our housing situation. We've heard about the amount of electricity that is imported into BC. My understanding is that some of that electrical power is generated from other sources. It's not all hydroelectric. Some of it is actually by burning natural gas, for instance. So the other thing that concerns me a little bit with the housing crisis is that Metro Vancouver has municipalities at varying levels. Some are more stringent, some are about the same as us, and some are less. And my concern there is that when it comes to the housing crisis, investment dollars are somewhat mobile, and so they can go to other cities, Surrey. And I have talked to some builders who have indicated that that is what they plan on doing. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it's a real practical consideration when we're talking about the housing crisis. We do want housing to be built in Richmond. And this is only one element of housing, to be clear, duplexes and single-family homes. But the thing about the housing continuum is it's kind of a contagion, like things that happen in one sector of housing can tend to build confidence or lessen confidence.
We're going to have to get you to move it along.
Okay. All right, I'll wrap up with a couple quick comments. Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation and the Royal Bank have recent reports out. Canada is in need of 5.8 million homes by 2030. We are projected to be about 3.5 million homes short by that time. So we've had a 15% drop in Metro Vancouver from July 23 to July 24 in housing. And so moving it right along, there's many reasons for that. It's not all to do with this issue, it's to do with lots of things, interest rate, construction costs. But the fact is, I'm reluctant to do things ahead of the provincial timeline when it comes to the step codes that tend to do anything that add extra costs onto houses. Talking to builders, and you can tell me when my time's up, Your Worship. Talking to builders, I get different numbers, 24,000, okay, 24,000 to 100,000. So that's why I am in favor of option 3. Thank you.
Thank you. So listen, we got a very long agenda and we got a closed agenda, okay? I'm gonna ask staff to be brief. Sorry? Two closed agendas, yes. So I'm gonna ask councilors to be very brief and staff to be very brief. And let's get to the, get to the bottom of this.
Your worship.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thanks very much. First of all, thank you to all the delegations, and thank you for staff for the great report. I'll try to be brief and not repeat anything that's here. I'm glad we're examining this issue because we should have examined it a long time ago. The climate change is not only here, it's past us. And I just caution us about rushing towards 2032. It'll be here before you know it. And we should be addressing this every day. What I heard tonight, though, is, and I want to thank Mr. Penner because I think Mr. Penner put it all in perspective, what is realistic and what is possible. We're going around the table and we're jumping all over the place. Yes, we have to do something. As mentioned, we have a housing crisis, we've got to handle that. That's our bread and butter in Richmond in terms of economics. We've got to handle the climate change and satisfy what we can do with the climate change, but we've got to set our goals. What goals do we want to achieve each time? And because we have to set those out, we need to address them. And the thing is, what is realistic? What is practical? Are we going to decide on something tonight? We have the home builders saying to us it's going to cost $70,000 for more housing, to have the equivalent in housing. Okay, that's going to put housing out of somebody's reach. Is it going to stimulate housing or not? And yet, on the other hand, we have to take the information we have and be factual about it and have a balance between what we need in the housing, where we're going, and all the issues with regard to climate change. But we need to address them, and we're not going to do that all tonight, Your Worship. If we're going to settle on a step code tonight, fine, okay, that's one thing, but what about all the other things that we're not even doing? So with that, I know it's an emotional thing with some people, but we've got to go with a factual thing on what is achievable. And I think Richmond's moving ahead in the right direction. We can do more, we must do more, but what order do we do them in? So with that, Your Worship, I'll wait till I hear the other debate and go from there and see what kind of reason. I really have a problem, and I don't think we should kid ourselves with what's with electricity. Every time we've come forward, when we get numbers like 17% and we're sending everything down to the states, we're impiling things, that's a crisis in itself. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. And we can't handle it. We can't solve it. But there are crises outside, external crises that are, we've got to work within those and do the best we can for Richmond and to continue along with our goals. So with that, I'll wait and hear what everybody else has to say.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, well, we certainly heard from both sides, but we heard just as many builders speak about building green single-family homes, just as many as the builders who said we needed to accelerate to step 3. So it certainly was not tipped in the direction of option 3 at all. And I find it very disingenuous to hear the argument about the housing crisis and that we need new housing and that this is affecting the affordability of new housing. We're talking about single-family homes. So every existing single-family homes are getting torn down and replaced by gigantic mansions. That is not a solution to the housing crisis. That is not, people are not lined up waiting to get into an inefficient giant mansion. So we're not creating new housing by making it cheaper to build mansions. So it's just that's not the type of housing we're talking about. And there was some, a lot of lobbying going on from Fortis BC at this meeting. It's unfortunate that Hydro wasn't here, but to hear, greenwashing terms like renewable natural gas, when only 1% of the gas that comes into our homes is from renewable, and that's from burning garbage. So it's a greenwashing term. It's not anything that's moving forward. Anyway, I do have a few questions of staff. So regarding Port Moody, you're aware that Port Moody is doing the highest level starting January, and they've provided exemptions for anybody who is in stream who can't make it work. And it's not just if hydro can provide the power or not, it's that they can't make it work financially, their applications are in place, and it's not going to work. And this would be just a staff decision, or does it go to council each time? Port Moody said that they haven't had a single request for an exemption so far. So what can you tell us about that, about Port Moody?
Through the chair to Councilor Gillanders, yes, we're aware of the policy that Port Moody has put in place. Similarly, City of Richmond did something similar when it brought in the step code, because we were an early adopter, lots of worry that builders were going to miss particularly their tightness target. and so there was a there was a fail-safe in there, very similar to what Port Moody has done. And that says if at the time of occupancy, it's shown that you're deficient in through your energy model or your blower door test, whatever it might be, then there's provision for reasonable mitigation of those to occur. And so then the building official would use judgment in terms of issuing the occupancy permit to ensure that they had made all reasonable means of achieving the step code target, and maybe using the equivalent requirements in the prescriptive part of the BC Building Code, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have to address the hydro capacity issue, because that's a question that a lot of the councillors seem to have. And what we have now is everybody is on hydro. Everybody. Some people are on gas, some aren't, but everybody is already on hydro. So we already have the capacity. We have to have it because everybody needs it regardless. And right now people are running their gas furnaces, and then because of the heat that we're experiencing, people are using plug-in air conditioners. So that consumption, is it not greater using a gas furnace and air conditioners? Is that not a greater electric usage than just installing just a heat pump system?
Through the chair to Councilor Gillanders, I would say so on the face value of it, yes. A single heat pump system that's providing both space heat and cooling at the same time, and a distribution system to distribute that heating and cooling in the home would be the best way to go.
Yeah.
If you designed it right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And just by way of that, existing buildings, existing homes represent their own particular challenges in terms of retrofits. Whereas new construction, you've got that runway in front of you to more or less within your cost constraints to design that home to the client's needs or to whatever goals you're trying to achieve. So it tends to be more cost effective to put in things like high performance mechanical systems in these buildings cost effectively at the time of construction. So
yeah, so through the chair, just a couple more comments and I'll wrap up. We heard the gas people say that it costs, $13.05 per year for gas versus $36.90 per year for electricity. But that was only talking about heating. That's not talking about heating and cooling. So it's that was a disingenuous comparison, because we heard from the other builder, Green Builder, who said it's actually a 25% lower operating cost with an all-electric system. So that's the reality. And a cost of a hydro hookup should range from $838 to $2,225. And to go from the step 3 to the step 5 for a single family home is going to be an extra $24,000. So is it safe to say that a reasonable increase of going from step 3 to step 5 would be the $2,000 for a new hookup and $24,000 max for building costs? So I would like to see we go with the status quo, and anybody who is in stream, if they've got anything that comes up that causes the hydro to be more than $2,225 for a hookup, because they're in I don't know why it would be, but if there was, or it's going to cost their building costs to be over $24,000 difference, then we can look at providing exemptions. I think that why are we making it that it's more desirable to tear down a house and put up a big mansion? If people want to keep their gas stove and they want to keep their gas furnace, they could renovate instead of building a new home. And that was actually the kind of policy that we want to encourage. And the other disingenuous argument is this idea of if there's a power outage, a gas furnace doesn't work without power. It needs an electric switch. So you can't run a gas furnace without power. So if the power's out, your heat's out. I guess maybe it's different with the boiling radiant heating, I'm not sure. Can you answer that?
Through the chair, the Councillor Galanders, yes, that's my understanding as well, is that natural gas furnaces and boilers need electricity to light the device instead of having an always-on pilot light, which is dangerous. They need it for the fans or the pumps. They need it for the thermostat and for the control system.
Yeah. So just my last comment is that the only thing that you would have in a power outage is what the person who spoke about, she was able to finish cooking the Christmas dinner because they have a gas stove. But we've already been warned by all the scientists that we should not have gas stoves. It is killing thousands of people every year with the emissions. It's giving children asthma. It's causing huge health costs. We're not supposed to be using them anymore. So there really isn't any reason to not move forward. You know, we declared the climate emergency. We didn't declare $18,000 more for a house emergency.
Okay, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. And thanks to staff for the reports, although there was, for me, a little bit of confusion in reading them and being able to understand clearly what the ramifications were in looking at being at a certain step code and then what the carbon code was, and if this, then that. I had a little bit of trouble going through that. And English is my first language. I was excited originally when we were moving to passive house. You know, I thought that this was going to be the next great thing, or if you will, a good rehash, because the technology's been around for a long time. I didn't realize that we were taking away the choice that people could still heat their hot water, or heat their home if they were still cold and they wanted to do that. We had a bit of a break last week, so I took some time. I read some books. I read A Good War by Seth Klein, who talked about, you know, attacking the climate emergency like it is a war. I read The Story of More by The Story of More by Hope Yaron, and she talks about our overconsumption and what we're doing to our own world. I read All That We Can Save. It's a bunch of pieces put together by Anna Johnson and Catherine Wilkinson, and it talks about equity and decolonizing in the realm of climate emergency. I also read Revenge at the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about how there's 5% of the vehicles on the road are responsible for 55% of the pollution. And so there's many things that we can be doing to take a bite out of this GHG piece. I know that we had climate anxiety and energy anxiety when I was growing up. You know, we had 3 Mile Island meltdown in 1979. We had Chernobyl meltdown in 1986. We had people talking about the desertification of the Sahara. So I understand where students are, where they're thinking about this and they're worried about the world and the earth that we're living in. I also know that our electricity prices are artificially low because we import coal-based electricity from the US at night. I do worry about rapidly increasing prices when all of California starts plugging in their cars and they don't have any coal-based electricity to send back to us overnight. So, and most people aren't heating their houses that much at night. They're heating it during the day. They're heating the water during the day when they're doing their dishes and their laundry. I do recall as a kid when I'd go to my grandmother's house and she'd be sitting there with her gas stove on and open, and she was heating her kitchen with her gas stove because she only really wanted to heat the kitchen or something. But she was heating her kitchen with her gas stove. I don't want to think about people heating their homes with their gas stove because their electricity bill is too high and burning that in their home. I think that the province of BC has an aggressive goal. And I think if we meet that goal, that we're in a good place. And I know that everyone who's come to the table has pretty much agreed that the technology continues to improve on the heat pumps and other things, and the costs of all these new technologies will come down, and the efficacy of those technologies will come down, particularly when the province all moves to that. So we're going to slow down what we're doing by 1 or 2 years. We're talking about 100 houses here. And we talk about single-family homes and we say, oh, but it doesn't matter because it's not affordable because they're fancy. But under the new Bill 44, my understanding is some of those could be actually 4 or 6 plexes. They don't fall under a different number because they're still essentially a single-family plot space, and the heating approach is still the same, and the ability for hydro to hook it up is the same. And holding them up for an additional 4 or 5 months so that they can only be electric is a huge burden to be able to have to wait to make your home and to be able to move back into the home that you're building, to have to rent somewhere else, to be waiting for all this. I think it's, for anyone who's built a home here in Richmond or anywhere else, it's complicated, it's hard work. It's a lot of waiting, a lot of delays. And adding in the hydro delay is an extra one, and it's not fair. And I don't think it's getting us where we need to be. So I agree, I think option 3 is the good place to be. It puts us in line with the province, which is already an aggressive place in terms of GHG and the environment, and it also puts us in a more aggressive place in being able to build more homes.
Councillor Al.
Yes, Worship. I want to start with a question. I don't know if staff have any information about the hours of power interruption in the last year, and total hours, and what's been the impact on the economy and on people's household.
Through the chair to Councillor Au. Yes, staff in the memo on, let me see, just make sure I got it in front of me here.
Do we know why it happened?
Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies for that. So on GP 140, the first bullet point in the supplemental electrical information, let's see here.
Okay, what's your next point while he's looking for that?
Actually, what I'm trying to get at is that I think we have to be mindful of the capacity of the, BC Hydro. The fact that they are importing a large quantity of electricity from elsewhere, and there's a risk. And I think everybody in the city has experienced power interruption. Some areas may be even more frequent than the other. And I think that would be an interruption of people's living if that happens. So I think first of all, my concern is about the capacity of BC Hydro in terms of producing sufficient electricity. My second point is that now, I know that some people might not be happy or satisfied with the provincial government's plan. But I think we have to realize that BC government is still leading in some areas in the country for having a progressive goal in terms of fighting with climate change and the step code. So it's not a backward approach, and it may not be sufficient, may not be the best, but it's still good enough and moving forward. So I think there's no reason that we should say, hey, we should do away with what the provincial government is doing and move ahead all on ourselves. And my third point is that we have to strike a balance. I understand that, we want to achieve a noble goal, a good goal, but at the same time, I think we all hear from the other side that the building industry is telling us that they are not ready by 2025 to meet our goal. For whatever reason, knowledge, technology, and I think somebody mentioned that we need more training for the people in the industry. So I think there's a real problem there for 2025, the goal that we set for ourselves in the city. So, for myself, I'm more inclined to support option 2 because, we still keep our goal as a city, and staff in the report mentioned that if we opt for option 2, we are still able to meet our goal, even though, we might delay a few years for achieving that. But by 2032, staff said that we should achieve the original goal anyway. So I think we are trying to do what is the best for the city in a sense that, while we are still moving forward, but we also give some time for the building industry to find a way or to catch up, in terms of knowledge and skills to meet that goal. So I would say that my preference is option 2, which is keeping our goal while giving some breathing room for the industry.
Councillor Wolf. Sorry, what?
Through the chair to Councillor Wellen, and apologies for my glasses doing funny things with me. We did derived a statistic from their information looking at basically the average number of service interruptions, and you can look at that by municipality, and the number of hours without power in Richmond have been about 1/3 below BC Hydro's overall system average. So that's the latest that we have to answer that question, and I apologize I didn't get to you on that right away. Just in terms of the timing aspect and what that means for industry capacity in terms of familiarity with and competencies with heat pump-based systems and integration, right-sizing mechanical systems and cost-effective construction. We're conscious of that, and certainly any jurisdiction that has implemented the STEP code, that's been part of the conversation, is understanding that industry needs to come along. We've got to wait until affordable models and people become familiar and receive training in these installation procedures. So that's why we've structured our incremental approach to the STEP code to balance that out. And our current options have 3 sets of options that builders can choose from, which is the most of any municipality. So along that staircase of options, the idea was that there'd be the options there that would be most cost effective depending on the application. So.
Yeah, there's 3 options, but they get to the same point in the end, right? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. We do have the option to receive this for information, so not option 1, 2, or 3. That's what I am obviously leaning towards. And I think the majority of people who've spoken to us tonight, who have written to us for tonight, and who spoke to us last time, I have the number of 48 people in favor of status quo, or option 1, and about 12 people who've spoken to us or written to us on option 2 or 3. I think the table right now is quite split. It's probably going to go to the mayor's decision in the end of this. And so I want to correct a couple things, make a few comments. I don't have any questions to staff. I think our staff are doing a wonderful job in advocating for what needs to be done, and I think it's foolish that we're not listening clearly to them. In the report, it actually says that we have 160 building permits roughly per year, not 100. So there's a lot at stake here in the next year and the year after and the year after. I think we need to detach from the provincial minimums and not follow what they're doing, because they might not last very long and it could sway the other way and it could get rid of this altogether. So we need to take care of the people who are going to live in these houses in the future after all of us. I think option 1 is not good because it's already going to produce 265 tons of carbon dioxide emissions just by 2030 and beyond if we're delaying. So I think the status quo has the most predictable choice. I liked a couple terms I heard today, the gas guzzler houses. So now I think about houses being electrified and the alternative being a gas guzzler house. I also heard a line there about there being no air borders. And so even though your house can be electrified, we can all, the whole 8 billion people, suffer the consequences of more people living like gas guzzler house owners. And I have gas in my house. I would rather it not have gas. I got it, and it just had all this new gas equipment put in. I'm not about to rip it out. I don't have funding. I don't have interest to retrofit. I'd rather only ever have houses in my life and my kids that are electrified going forward. I can't control it at the time being. So I really valued the speakers that we had, highlighting the consideration of youth and future generations. That's kind of who I am. Climate emergency declaration, thanks for those who supported that in the past. And I think to keep our actions matching those declarations, this is one of those opportunities for sure. I don't know about others, but I've spent a week up in the gas fields in northeastern BC and talked to people who are leaving because their cows all died, or they're sick, or they can't stand the flares and the smell and the damage that the processing of this does, let alone the impact it does to people in Richmond houses that are suffering the consequences. As I'm just wrapping up here, we've got the Community Energy Emissions Plan. It's done wonders for us to provide leadership. I always get excited when the city says we're entering into a competition, we could win an award. I typically think we can. But if we don't follow through with our status quo on this one, definitely my feelings of us winning awards and our awards that great. I think the real win is producing a future Richmond that is better than it is now. And I think we're at a critical point to keep that. The only thing we can choose at this table right now is the choice to go the electrified route at our own speed, as opposed to letting someone else determine it for us. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so I wanted to make my motion.
From my point of view, whatever we choose, it's not a question of what we're going to do, it's when we're going to get there. And so there's obviously difficulties with the transition for this. And it's simply a matter of timing for the whole situation. I can't see, let's see now, where is it? Yeah, the option 3 talks about reducing the requirements at this point. I think that would be a mistake to go backwards before you go forwards. So to me, it should be, if we want to make a change, make it option 1 or 2. I think that the way to do it is to have option 2, and we may find it satisfactory to say, okay, if we do that, maybe at the beginning of 2026, we'll review the situation again and see how it's going as to what we should be doing. But I think option 2 still keeps the pressure on the situation. It's far more important that we do this right than we do it this minute. It's important, but it's important for the long run. And that's the way I see it. The other thing is, I'm indifferent to whether we get some kind of an award or not. And I'm also mindful of the fact that if we have 48 people who speak in favor of something and 12 are on the other side, this isn't some kind of a referendum. This is, we're looking for approaches and, solid reasoning. And so that's why I think that we should go with the option 2. It gives some relief, but it still keeps the pressure on. That's what I think. Councillor Rowley.
I want to move option 2.
Okay, now, so we'll move option 2. Now, Councillor Day, so that's moved and seconded. Now, in terms of yours, you're talking about this referral on the case-by-case to allow new homes to have gas if they can't provide the electrical service. So that could be a companion to whatever option it is?
Well, I would prefer status quo and then this motion. That way we're covering our bases completely.
Okay, well, listen, why don't we deal with your referral motion after we deal with whatever option it's going to be? Okay, and we'll come back. So option 2 is on the table. Debate on that. Let's see, that's Councillor Galanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody please go to page GP 142 of your package here? If you look at the list that is equivalent to what we're doing, our status quo, we are in the middle here with 19 other municipalities: Burnaby, Central Saanich, Colwood, Cowichan Valley, City of North Vancouver, District of North Vancouver, Esquimalt, Nanaimo, New West, North Cowichan, Saanich, Township of Langley, Victoria, View Royal, West Vancouver, Whistler, Vancouver. And then doing more than that, more than us, it's not on the list, is a few repetitions plus Port Moody and Qualicum Beach. If we go back here and do option 2, we are moving ourselves away from our peers here into the less stringent than Richmond category, which has Poco and Surrey in the Lower Mainland. West Van and City of North Vancouver District or North Vancouver are actually in the middle column. They're just on the less stringent for some things that they haven't done yet, but they're actually in the middle with us. So we're going to go backwards to join in the Lower Mainland, just Poco and Surrey. Why? Is everybody else in the middle here, all these 19 other municipalities doing this, and we're going to go backwards? It doesn't make any sense. If they're able to do it in all these other municipalities, we're able to do it here. And I just would like to ask a question of staff. If someone wants to convert their single-family home into a sixplex, would that not be like a townhouse development with DCCs? And it's different than just a single-family house, and they wouldn't necessarily have to follow by this. Is that, another councillor said it would be the same, and so we're going to discourage SSMUH.
Is it the same or different?
Through the chair to Councillor Gill.
Oops, sorry, just a minute. Go ahead.
My understanding is you're talking about new construction and a small multi-unit housing application coming in, replacing an existing single detached home. Is that correct? Yeah. Then our Part 9 requirements for the energy step code and zero carbon step code would apply, the bylaw requirements, because it's classified as Part 9 residential construction.
Looks like James
But it
wants
doesn't
to
apply
say-
for townhouses?
Just a minute. James wants to say something.
No, I'll just speak over Norm's shoulder. Through the chair to Councillor Day. It all depends on the number. Sorry, Councillor Gillanders. It all depends on the number of units. So if it's 4 units or less, we consider that a Part 9 building. That's something that's really akin to a house or a duplex. If it's 5 units or more, it's really a townhouse application.
So it would apply to up to 4 units under this Bill 44 stuff.
Well, and then there's also another step code that applies to Part 3 buildings, so that status quo will stay.
But anyways, people can renovate their home and they can add on 2 or 3 units, and it's not a new construction, it's a renovation with an add-on, and they can keep their gas if they so choose. So we're not stopping any sort of housing. We're just going backwards, and I don't understand who's asking for this. I mean, we've heard from so many people and professionals and builders, and I haven't heard anybody say they want us to go to option, not many saying they want us to go to option 3. I don't know where this came from, and the people that are pushing for it at this table are going to be dead before the impacts of this are going to be on our next generation. So it's really ironic. So no, I vote against option 2, and let's vote for the status quo.
No, let's go. She's the youngest.
Thank you. Option 2 doesn't actually move us into the other category with Port Coquitlam or other people, because it's continuing our existing approach and it just delays the next step. So it doesn't actually push us into a different category of slow adopters or provincial adopters, if you will.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, when we did this comparison, we did it based on, we would probably maintain our current status quo requirements into 2025. And then we looked at what each local government had in bylaw or was intending to do in their bylaw through a council motion to move forward in their municipality from January 2025 onward. So we used 2025 as that base comparator. A year from now, a year further down the road, things might change, but that's what we use to do the.
So is it in the same category or not?
We stay in the same, we can still wave the same paper around and be proud of ourselves. Okay, thank you. And however, option 2 still restricts the ability for people to heat their home with gas or to use gas for hot water heating as well.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Liu. No, if you build to step 5, You can have natural gas heating. And I think as we mentioned earlier, we've actually made an administrative change to make that significantly easier by modeling that natural gas unit as a backup for the heat pump. So that the modeling shows that that really significantly reduces costs, which we understand was a concern.
Okay, so they will be able to have gas heating, but they have to build to step 5. And step 5 means that, like, it's passive house essentially, right? And so they will have like the blow test where they make sure that it's airtight and all that other stuff, right?
Step 5 is not as high as passive house, but it is a high level of energy efficiency.
Okay, does it have the airtightness test?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's being tested on an airtightness basis. I don't know how many other people open a window at night when they sleep, but I do. But, which then negates half your airtightness thing, I think, anyway. But, okay, thank you.
Okay, don't see any more speakers, so what's on the floor is option 2. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, so the only 2 that are in favor are Councillor Au and myself. I'll take another motion.
Move option 3. Councillor Day has her motion before Alexa has her motion.
I'm sorry.
She had said earlier she wants to make a motion, which is moving receipt for report plus the referral.
Okay, you want to move receipt of this report for information.
Can I just clarify, is there any difference between receiving for information or status quo? Because I'm kind of confused.
That is status quo, is to simply receive it for information.
Okay, so I would move that we receive it for information, and part 2 of that is the referral motion that refers to staff to create a policy that allows council to consider exceptions on a case-by-case basis to allow new homes to have gas hookup if BC Hydro cannot provide the electric service that is required. And I have a rationale if you'd like me to read that.
Yeah, we've got that. We've all got it. And I'm going to separate out those 2. So those who wish to receive this for information, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and those opposed? That is carried with Councillors Liu, Au, Hobbs, and the mayor opposed. And on the referral, which is to, as I understand, the wording is, why don't you read out the wording?
Yeah, so refer to staff to create a policy that allows council to consider exceptions if, on a case-by-case basis, to allow new homes to have gas hookup if BC Hydro cannot provide the electrical service that is required. And in the rationale, I've got all the reasons why. And I just feel that it's not right when a builder wants to build a brand-new house and gets charged $60,000 to upgrade the BC Hydro system. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to receive this for information, because BC Hydro should be sitting right here answering questions, tough questions.
That's definitely true. Councillor Liu, on the motion.
Thank you. Well, it would be nice to consider things on a case-by-case basis. I think it's inappropriate. I think if you're trying to stick to this elevated step plan, then you should just go for it. But this is just turning it around halfway. And what does it mean if BC Hydro can't hook up? Is 70,000 your baseline of they can't hook it up? Is 30,000? Is a 9-month wait can't hook up? Is a 3-year wait? Like what is the litmus test of how long someone should wait or how long we should force someone to wait? That it's a little bit loose. I think we need to be more specific. If they want it and have some sort of rationale for it, then maybe we should just let them. In which case, why don't we just get rid of the zero carbon step code altogether, stick with our building code, make people build better in the first place, but let them heat it however they want. And if they've built it so much better, they probably don't need heating anyway, and they can decide.
Councillor Day, I've taken it, all that kind of detail would be forthcoming.
Yeah.
We're referring this to staff. They're going to talk about exceptions. They're going to talk about the criteria for cost effectiveness. Cost effective is in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in there, yeah.
Okay, so the detail, I mean, those are valid points, but details are yet to come.
Yes.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and I support the motion. I think that this is a referral to staff to consider how you can write a policy on exemptions. I don't think it needs to be the specific wording as far as the council considering each application one by one. I think every building permit coming to council would be probably not effective. I think that staff could come up with a policy similar to what Port Moody is doing, where anybody who's in stream who can't make it work can be given an exemption, and it could be, I would like to see an options of what our guideline would be and what staff's guideline would be, and it would be anything that's beyond a reasonable cost that you've outlined already in your report, which it should be around whatever it should be for a hydro hookup and whatever it should be for an increase in building cost. And anything that's over that, for whatever reasons and extraordinary circumstances, that it's above what it should be, then you can provide them an exemption for that, and that would be for in-stream applications. Port Moody's making that work. They haven't had anybody complain. They haven't had anybody ask for an exemption, and it's fine. And so this is just to protect the builders and anybody who's in-stream from any unreasonable, unjustifiable costs and prohibitive things that might come up to stop them from moving forward.
I believe that the referral talks about council considering a policy. So that's going to come back to us.
Perfect.
It's not us considering every application for an exemption.
So council's considering an exceptions policy. Okay.
A policy for exceptions on a case-by-case
Yeah,
basis.
policy for exceptions.
Councillor Al.
Well, I just want to follow on what Councillor Glandis mentioned. Well, this is exactly, I think we have to clarify. Are we developing an exemption policy, or are we considering exemption based on the condition that if BC Hydro cannot provide these service? I mean, they're two different things.
We are considering a policy for when there is that situation and hydro can't service it.
So that's the only condition.
That's what it
Well,
says.
I mean, this is what it says. So, but I agree with Laura that, there are other possibilities for exemption, and I want to consider that.
They're not on the floor.
So I want to move amendment that this could be one example of many situations that exemptions should be considered. This should not be the only condition.
No, you can make that motion after we vote on this one. That's getting into a whole different world. All right, so on the motion, this referral motion, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. Now, you want to make a further referral?
Okay, yes, I want to make further.
To consider exemptions generally?
Or conditions that we should consider.
Okay, so it would be a referral to staff to consider policies for exemptions to the status quo, step code requirements.
Yes.
Neither do I.
It's for anything that isn't going to work. Coming up with a policy that will address anything that doesn't work under the status quo. There's going to be a policy, and either it'll come back to us or it'll be in the hands of staff or whatever.
But that's the referral.
No.
Tell me.
The referral only talks.
1,000 things on the frickin' list.
Exactly. Just a minute. Councillor Day made the motion in terms of hydro not being able to provide the service. This says everything else can be anything else.
We'll be waiting 10 years.
Okay,
No,
go ahead.
this is not everything else, because staff is telling us they are already having a policy of some kind to exempt the step code, right? So I would just want to have further clarification what staff is doing. I don't know. So what other situations or considerations that staff has already encountered? And then I think we should bring it back and make it into a guideline or policy.
Well, that's what they're gonna look at.
Yeah.
That's good. They're gonna add some definitions.
Yes, that's what.
What kind of exemptions, when, everything about it.
Yes, exactly.
Everything other than the hydro, which we've already dealt with. Okay, Councillor Day.
Yeah, that's way too broad for me. I can't support that.
All right, Councillor Galanders.
Staff would come back with a policy of what kinds of things could come up, and then we can vote on it or change it when it comes back. So I'm okay with that.
All right. Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I'm okay with it on the one hand, but wouldn't that just be part of the discussion and staff takes that under advisement because they know how the conversation has gone, right? So is it necessary to have a motion on that or advisement?
Well, yeah, if we want a policy, unless we want to leave it in their hands and you can ignore this if you want. Yeah, we have to have a policy. And from my point of view, I find that way too wide. I'm open to having other exceptions besides hydro not coming forth. Maybe Fortis isn't complying or, could be all kinds of things. But I think that we need to embody that in the motion rather than just leaving it wide open. That's my point of view. Okay, we're going to call the question on this further referral. All those in favor? That is, and those opposed. Okay, Councillor Liu, were you in favor? No, you're not. Okay, so Councillor Liu, Councillor McNulty, Councillor Al were in favor of that. Everyone else is opposed, so it's defeated. All right, anything else on this? We've only talked about it for 2 hours. Yeah, right. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, we're now adjourned and, huh? Okay. Well, so far. Okay, I'm going to, excuse me, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, if you could exit quietly. We have 2 more meetings to go, 3 more meetings, actually. Okay, I'm going to call the finance meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes? All those in favor, opposed, carried. The fee for the early review of rezoning applications. Someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Discussion on it. Anything to add to your reports?
Nothing further to add.
All those in favor? What? Are you in favor of it? Okay, do we need it? We got 3 agendas to go.
Okay, I thought it was a little bit high. I thought that.
Anyone else find it high? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Utility budgets. We've got a number of components to that. So, any general comments you want to make? We're going to go through each section.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so let's go through it. The first one is, where are we? Water. Any comments on water?
If you like, I can go over the options. If not,
We've got the options, unless anybody has questions on them. You're recommending it for all the options, option 2.
That's correct.
All the budgets. Any questions? Okay, Councillor Day.
Isn't it true that we have like the highest rate of meters in Richmond, and that's probably brought the water level costs down as much as we can?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that's correct. Our metering program as well as our water conservation program has been very instrumental in keeping our costs very low.
And how does that compare to other cities, our rate that we're going to have to charge?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we're not aware of the other cities' 2025 rates at this time, but when we compare, if you look at the chart at the end of this report, it compares the utility rates with neighboring municipalities, and we are very competitive.
Okay, so it's fair. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Just quickly, 2 things. Metro Vancouver is increasing the water rate by 7.2. What is our projected increase? And how much money are we going to continue taking out of the rate stabilization fund for a realistic picture of what we should be paying for it?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, the city's 2025 water rate is increasing by 6.4%. 4.2% is as a result of Metro Vancouver.
Well, but they're increasing by 7.2.
That is their water rate, but in terms of the city's increase for the city's water rate portion, it accounts for 4.2 of that 6.
Okay, what I'm trying to get is, this is a pretty damn good deal. Where if you were in another municipality, you'd be paying the full tariff with water meters or without it. And this is what I'm getting. I'm glad we have water meters. And that's one of the problems. We need to put the percentages of each, in each of these areas. And I'll be asking that question as we go along. So if you've got them, give it to us and we'll ask the question. Because I think it's very important that we let the taxpayer know, given the publicity Metro Vancouver is getting and also what we're getting. And I just want to make sure that because we have a rate stabilization program, we are subsidizing everything along the way. So they're not really paying the real tariff. Yeah, we're taking money out of rate stabilization, are we not?
Well, the way I see it, it's zero right across the board. Are we using rate stabilization on this one?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We are currently not using it. It is available when we see more significant Metro Vancouver rate increases in the future.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks through the chair. Just a quick one. When you look at the pie graph or chart, Metro's percentage is going up seemingly on a continual basis. Is there, like, what's the long-term forecast for that? Is there a point at which that becomes unsustainable? That's on page 15. And you talk about the percentages and how they've gone up over the last year. And the same applies to sewer, but I know we're talking about water now.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the only information that we have from Metro Vancouver at this point is their 5-year financial plan. So their rate projections for the next 5 years is outlined on FIN 20.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, so the next, are you here for all the budgets?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so the next one is sewer utility, and I see that we're adding a bit of personnel in there.
Correct. So we're recommending option 2, and that includes a $500,000 increase to our capital infrastructure replacement program. The reason for that is because we are currently funded at $6.8 million annually. Our aging infrastructure analysis identified the need for $12.2 million in annual funding. In addition to that, we're also recommending that the pump station grease management program be increased by $241,000. And that is to address the increasing demand as a result of population growth as well as growth in the restaurant sector.
Okey-doke. Any questions? Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just quickly on that, the grease one, 241,000. Is that enough considering the major issue we have in Richmond with restaurants and people and what you've done over here and the publicity we've got on that?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, at this point, we feel that this is enough for us to kind of move to the next step and kind of keep up with the demand. If there is further need in the future, we'll be coming back to council with recommendation.
If I may too, it's not a budget item, but I believe we need to have a referral to staff for a solution on education and an opportunity possibly to provide pickup or whatever, because we do have vessels down the workyard for grease, for oil, for this, and people can take it down there. And we're spending millions of dollars opening up Blundell Trunk. And this is probably the 3rd time that I can recall, Your Worship, that we've done that. So I think we need to accept the sewer utility, but also ask staff to have some direction on how we can address the issue and to mitigate it, because it'll be back in a number of years.
Can I suggest that should go to Public Works?
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, put it on the agenda, Chair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll be there.
Okay. flood protection utility, again, it's option 2. And comment?
That's correct. So option 2 includes the non-discretionary increases, as well as in 2021, council endorsed an accelerated flood protection program. So this would include those capital infrastructure increases to do things like upgrade our drainage system and our dikes. In addition, this includes a $831,000 transfer for the dike repair program, which is currently located and operating. Because of the activities are more directly related to flood protection, it belongs in the utility, or it's more suitable to be in the utility. So the recommendation is to transfer that amount into this utility, and as a result, you will see a reduction in the operating budget side.
Okay, go ahead.
In addition to that, one last thing is there's 3 operating expenditure increases. So namely drainage mainline flushing, level sensors, which is phase 1 of 2, and catch basin cleaning. So this is mainly to better respond to the increase in rainfall intensity that we've been getting.
Okay, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for this report. One of the things I'm looking at is a large non-stratified ICI on page FIN 39. Sorry. It's going to go up from 12,000 to 17,000. So for a large property like Lansdowne, who has a lot of impermeable space, and I think that's what we kind of had in mind, that we're trying to appropriately charge them for having large impermeable tracts of land. That being said, Richmond Driving Range is also a large parcel of land, but because they have a commercial licensing, they have a different zoning on their property because they have the driving range on it, but the vast majority of their property is actually agricultural land. It's actually AG1, but because they can't have a split, it's kind of unfair. Like, for the most part, their whole property is permeable, but they're being charged the same as Lansdowne. And because we don't have a mechanism to split that, and because they're an ALR property, they can't subdivide their property down to have it make sense for them. So they're sort of being overly charged for this because they're being treated the same as Lansdowne, when clearly they're not. So there is a fairness component here that is, what can we do to create more fairness here?
Yeah, we do look at this on a year-by-year basis to improve equity, and we believe that what we're putting forward in this recommendation doesn't totally address that, but it takes the next step, and it'll take a number of years before we get there. Prior to the city having all these rate classes for flood protection, in the past, every property paid the same amount. So coming from kind of that starting point, we are at a better place now than we were back then. There is more work to be done, and we'll be taking a look at that moving forward.
Okay, but what are we gonna do for these guys in the meantime? Like, in the meantime, they're like, we'd like to redevelop our land. We can't actually add any soil to our land to raise it up because half our golf balls are underwater. But meanwhile, we're being dinged for this flood protection for 17 grand. Like, what are, like, it seems unfair. So is there some way we can look at some sort of doing a pro rata share of what is actually the industrial land on theirs? Can we do that? Like, I know there's all these rules that we can't, but there must be something we can do.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I think, or sorry, to Councillor Liu, I think that's something that we can investigate further into. What I can add is the rate definitely is based on their demand on the drainage system. So impermeability is one factor. The other is the value of the asset that's being protected by the system. So there's more than one factor that kind of goes into it, but we could go investigate that further.
Okay, so if we can look at that, then I can support this. But otherwise, we're like increased. They were already shocked when they got their $12,000 bill. They're going to have a complete heart attack when they get $17,000 because that property's shared by actually somebody that farms a big chunk of it. And then there's also the little greenhouse guy that sells flower, like plants and things. And it's like, and then the other guys, they have lots of grass too. So it's like, who should be taking this on. You obviously can't stick it to the guy who's just farming the land. That's not fair, but he's getting hit with it too.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. My two questions are about option 2 and to option 3. So we have already approved an acceleration of the flood protection program. So I question why are we not prioritizing these 3 positions, the project engagement associate position, the project manager, and the project coordinator? Then I have a follow-up.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, our intention was to minimize the rate increases as much as possible. We are still able to achieve our accelerated flood protection program with this recommended option, and we would be on pace to do that. Having those positions in option 3, I believe, would improve the coordination, but it's not a must that we have to have it to carry out the program.
Okay, great. Then just a follow-up through the chair is, yeah, I appreciate that maybe not being recommended, not prioritized right this moment, but maybe in a future year, those positions would be brought back in the similar way, but probably in option 2. Last question on that is, do any of those 3 positions have any role in habitat compensation for dike work impact? Because I know that it keeps getting pushed down the road, and I'm wondering if there's any role that these positions, these individuals would have in documenting and provisions for habitat compensation.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, these positions would not directly be working with that aspect. We would be able to address that through other means.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the 4th one is solid waste and recycling. Comment? Just a minute. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are recommending option 2. This does include option 1, which is the minimum non-discretionary costs, plus proposal to increase transfer to reserve by $250,000 for a total of $500,000 for addressing future capital and infrastructure requirements.
All right. Okay. I don't have any questions on that. So the recommendation, just to be clear, is option 2 for everything. So that's moved and it's seconded. Comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, staff. District energy utility rates. Alan, anything to add?
Your worship, I have nothing to add to the report.
Okay. So someone move it and second it. Discussion. All those in favor, any opposed? That is carried. Someone move adjournment. Thank you. We're now adjourned. We're going to go to the